wowie! Wow! Whoa! It's Plat VALORANT episode 71. We've been cracking jokes off camera. That's why we're all so smiley and happy.
They weren't very funny though, were they?
I thought they were funny. I was laughing.
Why are you starting off just?
This guy's a fucking.
It's
Grinch.
episode 71. I mean, you've been aerating that wine for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Now the viewers don't know
air.
because they're not around for the part where we're before the show, light banter.
Yeah, they want
the boys hanging out. Josh has just been sitting there twirling his wine. You really you lapping it up being on vacation, huh?
Yeah, I really am. I'm amazed that I've turned up to this. I mean, my parents are like, what are you doing working? And I'm like, is it really work? I'm sat here drinking, staring into a laptop. I mean, you wouldn't believe the setup that I've jerry-rigged here, by the way.
Can you show us?
I've got my legs in a laundry basket because there's nowhere else to put them. I can't really
show us.
I mean, I don't really know how to show you, but
oh, it's on a laptop.
It's on a laptop. And then I've got my legs. Look at that. I got my legs stuffed in this like little closet.
Is that your childhood desk? Like, what is that?
Yes, this is my old room from when I was, I don't know, 13, 14, something like that. So yeah, sweet memories.
Wow.
Yeah, I saw you posted you're eating some fine British cuisine, like the toad hole.
The toad in the hole.
Yeah.
Toad in the hole's lovely.
Well, when you say toad hole, it sounds like a frog's anus. It was
that's what it was called. And you said you're like, oh, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, this is called a toad hole. And it was
toad
in
the hole.
It kind of does look like a frog's anus, honestly.
It's toad in the hole. It's very
okay, I'll explain
meal.
No, I'm not gonna.
I'll explain what you're looking at. I'll explain what you're looking at. That's a enormous Yorkshire pudding, right? Which is, Google it if you don't know what a Yorkshire pudding is, but it's a classic of all Sunday roast cuisine. 3 good British sausages in a row. Actually, I think there's 4 in there, and then some air fried cauliflower, which my parents were experimenting with air frying it, and it wasn't quite crispy enough, but it was still pretty good. And then some peas and some gravy, just chilling, just having a good old time. And I think there's some roast carrot in there as well, but you can't see it.
Oh,
it's all right, slap up banging meal.
Yeah, very hearty meal. This is the kind of thing you'd expect when you go to the Edge water innkeeper.
Well, the Edgewall innkeeper.
Warm hearth. Hearty meal.
The other flavor text on that card is. Yeah, that's nice. So, well, all right.
I think we should just keep talking about Josh's holiday.
Oh wait, we didn't even mention. It's the Christmas special. There he is. Actually, Josh.
Yep, there's Josh.
I mean, this was actually you in a previous life.
Yeah, I don't even think that's a previous life. I think that's later on in this current life. It's when I get really insecure about being bald, so I grow a comb over to try and cover it and just become an innkeeper. God. And for some reason have jars full of gold. Don't know why. It should be beer, but that looks more like gold coins in there.
It's liquid gold.
It is, yeah.
God.
Yeah, he's just serving it up to the patrons. You guys want to talk about? What do you want to talk about?
The Plat chat. It's the Christmas special.
This is the Christmas special, yeah. And we've got some very special skits and gags cooked up for this episode. Right, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we don't have anything. We didn't really think of anything.
Yeah. It's either that or we talk about the VCT 2022 format announcement.
I think that's a great place to start. 2022 VCT format announcement, because there was announcements across all the regions where they put forward the detailing of a couple of the regions, but yeah, announcing the plans for the future, as you do in a thriving esports. You announce your plans for the future so people can make adequate plans. Definitely not throwing shade at any other esports scenes and industries.
World of Tanks could never.
World of Tanks was the one I was thinking of. But yeah, I mean, I don't really know how we can go about this. Do you just want to talk about each region in particular? We got links to what each one are planning?
I mean, I want to start here. Looks mighty similar to a copy-paste job from this year, doesn't it? Looks mighty similar to just a copy-paste job from 2021. I was listening to the episode from last week, and you were talking about, you had a topic that was essentially, was 2021 VCT a success? And, I understand the end result of that discussion was basically Balla and Mimi saying, yeah, it's been a great success. And you wouldn't have known how successful it was at the time. Reykjavik viewership blew everyone's nuts out. Yeah. And you didn't really know what we didn't expect that. But now you've got your expectations down, and they kind of just running it again, but shortening the season to presumably get some extra time towards the end where they can run different things over winter. I was hoping for something a bit different, a bit more, but perhaps my expectations are inflated.
It's not just exactly the same. I think it looks, especially when you look at that graphic, it looks exactly the same. But I think especially in EU, the way that they've announced the VRLs, the regional leagues and stuff like that, I think that kind of shows a bit deeper a vision for what a VCT could look like, because it's very tiered, right? And each region, which is super important, like they have a Spanish league, they have a French league, all these different things where you can qualify for the main. It's mad confusing still, and they didn't solve any of those problems. But like I don't know what to look at here.
Yeah, I think wasn't this a fan put together image like this?
I believe so.
Yeah,
probably. They never like until 2022 starts and we get Rivington in his beautiful voice talking over the format. We're probably not going to get a graphic, but either way, like the VRC, that's literally an amateur league in Europe, right? So that is pretty cool to me. The main top tier thing, yeah, it might be the same, but honestly, they got rid of a very useless section of the calendar, which was Masters 1 and the regional. The whole regional thing at the beginning, that was a waste of time. And
there we go, solved it.
How did that work? You just whiteboarded
just literally wiped it down. Okay, well, I think looking at the schedule and how it lines up, thinking in the ecosystem of Riot in terms of how they want to line it up as well with the League of Legends system, because when is Worlds every year? It's like October, November time.
October.
Yeah. They're probably trying to make sure that their ecosystems are not completely clashing with one another. And if I was to guess, this is the interim year. It's a bit unfortunate, but it's probably the interim year where they're keeping stuff going. And my expectation is because if you go back to the timeline as well, Kurt, for 2022, they showcase the third-party tournaments near the end after champs, and then the game changes and whatnot. And they don't really reveal what would happen in 2023 with January onwards. So the most likely scenario that I'm anticipating is that champs kind of finishes. There's a third-party tournaments leading into it. But then I imagine if they wanted to, they could then start in 2023, filling out the whole of the year starting at January. Do you see what we've had to leave a break at January because of champs coming off the back of December? That would be my
January. You'd have to start it in October or November, right, in order to get a full 12-month process. If you start it in January, it's the same as 2022.
Well, you still have extra time. You have an extra month.
Where's your extra month? Because you're starting in January rather than February, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose. I don't think that makes too much difference. To me, the biggest thing I look at when I see this is that the responsibility for putting on big LAN tournaments where the best teams in not just the world, but the best teams in the region play against each other now seems to be being pushed towards third-party tournament organizers, which I think is a good thing as long as they're incentivized to participate, which they previously have not been, either via a overly strict tournament licensing system or maybe a lack of faith or tools given. I don't know exactly what the reasoning is.
Did they say in the announcement? I didn't mean to cut you off, but I thought they said in the announcement they were making it easier.
Yeah, but what does that mean? I mean, does that mean that they were just banning people from doing it previously, or does that mean that they're reducing the tournament license? Like previously, maybe you had to pay 20K to run a tournament. Now you only have to pay 5K. I don't know what the issues with it were. Let's see if that works again.
Yeah, hold on.
Kind of, to be honest. I don't know what the issues with it were, but that is a really important thing because at the moment on their calendar, there's 3 LAN events for the entire year, right? Which is the same as it was in 2021, but also that was the year of COVID. I mean, potentially 2022 could be as well, but if your plan is that the world should be opening up, that seems like a pretty small amount of top teams playing against each other again, which to me was the worst part about this year was just we didn't see top teams play against each other often enough.
Yeah. That and I don't know how much detail they've put out in regards to how the qualification challengers tournaments are going to work, but if it's going to be essentially the same format as last year, that's unfortunate. And unfortunate. It's not.
No, so it's different in EU. I know in NA. I don't know what the open qualifier is, but there's one open qualifier, and it leads to 12 teams qualifying, and they play a round robin like season essentially. To qualify for playoffs, which is an 8-team double elimination.
Multiple
bracket.
weeks, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be like 6-7 weeks to do the round robin.
Oh, okay, cool. I didn't see that. That's good to know. That was definitely one of the two big concerns. That and what Josh was saying, just not enough tier 1 games. That the last stretch of this year was just a drought. Just searching for a droplet of high level gameplay.
Does it work for me?
Kind of.
Yeah,
there you go.
Nearly. I'm not a fan of the NA system when I saw it. I think that there's better ways to be able to run it. I think it's kind of cool that they've got a round robin system involved. We'll get to see multiple top level matches between the top teams in games that actually matter because they don't meet at the end of the bracket. They might meet round 1 and it'll still be important for them. What I really dislike about round robin, though, is still going to crop up here again, which is that you frequently have teams that are mathematically out of it still have to play at the end against teams that are fighting for their life. And so you frequently get like really wonky matchups towards the end where teams have given up or their roster's already decided to make a move and they're planning for the next tournament cycle. They don't give a shit about the game that's right in front of them. It's not just a seeding match. They're just literally eliminated, but they are forced to play just because they need to complete the round robin kind of system. That is, to me, the concern anytime round robin is used. And also the fact that it can just introduce draws. But when you have 12 teams, that really shouldn't be an issue. But that idea of having games like, you have Sentinels playing against an LG or something at the end of your cycle, and LG, like 2 of their players have already left, but they're just being kind of forced to turn up, and the team hasn't been scrimming for 2 weeks because they've been scrimming with their new trial players. Like, if that kind of stuff happens, it'll just ruin the storylines going into the event. I feel like there were better ways of structuring it, but it's still an interesting and new idea.
Hopefully that won't be too common, though, if it's going to be 8 out of 12 teams making it through. I would assume most of the games will still matter, just given how many teams are going to be going through, right?
But, I mean, sure, but there'll almost certainly be 1 or 2 teams that are just getting kind of stomped, and they know that they're out by the halfway mark.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Balla?
I
put you on the spot. I've just put you on the spot. I'll tell you about my biggest issue of last year, or the 2021 year, early on, was just the fatigue that I felt from the amount of matches, and like matches that felt like they had no value and importance, which is one of the things that I wanted to see reduced in 2022. Will that still be the case?
Robin. Welcome to round robins. I mean, if you like the regular season of sports instead of the playoffs, then this is the format for you.
Round robins are great for. Yeah, go ahead, Balla.
The nice part about it, though, is that like in a bracket system, you feel like you have to watch every single game. You know, in a regular season round robin, I could not tune into a game because I'm not interested in it, and it doesn't necessarily have the be all end all meaning for those 2 teams that are playing. Yeah, it matters, but I know the stakes beforehand, and it doesn't necessarily mean the end of the world for one of the teams. Whereas in the main events and the way that it happened last year, just like every single match meant a big deal. So it felt like you had to watch them. And it was every weekend without stop for, 2 months in a row. That was definitely draining. I agree.
Yeah, I think they've definitely pulled back on the viewer fatigue angle. Because if you really don't care that much about group stages, about games where you can't, there's no elimination factor to it, a lot of challenges, at least in North America, where they're running the round robin, is not going to have that element to it. So if you want to dial back as a viewer, then you might only have to tune into 5 weekends, maybe 6 weekends of the year. You've got Challengers Finals, Masters, another Challengers Finals, Masters, LCQ, and Champions. And that's 6 weeks, maybe not weekends, but 6 weeks out of the year. I'm not convinced, though, that that's a good system. And I think it really relies on having third-party tournament organizers running stuff at the same time for the scene to stay interesting. Because throughout February and March, you're going to see the top teams play, but I'm not a big fan of systems where you're not providing hype matchups for your top teams. But I think it's not a terrible system. It's just I don't think it's the best that they could have done, and I'm interested as to why they didn't opt for some systems which I would consider to be strictly better.
All the challenge, like the whole problem is that we're constantly playing qualifiers, and there's just nothing else to watch besides qualifiers. And I don't want to watch those. I'd rather watch something else. I'd rather watch the higher stakes thing. So that's why I'm still confused. Number one, why is there nothing in January? Like, why not have a third party have scheduled something there? Like, that would have been perfect, right?
Well, perhaps they have. The thing with third-party tournament organizers is that they're often really late to announce. Like, whenever Blast and Red Bull and stuff have run their tournaments, they tend to be, it's not like VCT where they announce them at the beginning of the year. Here's our plans. So they might just pop up throughout the year. I really hope so.
We have a bunch in NA right now. There's the NSG Winter's Champ and stuff like that, but it's just none of the best teams are playing. Like, maybe they all show up to the LAN in Philly in January, but I highly doubt that, just because there's no incentive for it. So NA is already covered in that regard in January without a big event. Europe, I don't know. So maybe that's the case, but either way, there's no way to run events while all that stuff is happening. While
challengers, not going to get good viewership.
I don't know well, that's another problem, but I don't know if that's 100% the case. Like, what if ESL ran a tournament? That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get bad viewership. But I do think with a big gap, there's no way that the tournament organizers like Blast or anybody who's not Blast is pretty top tier, but not ESL pretty much. They have to build a brand, and a Valorant tournament is a completely new brand for them. And if they're not consistently running series similar to VCT with qualifiers and whatnot, then there's no way that end of year stuff is going to bang like it should be.
Yeah.
I was trying to get the camera to focus.
I mean, yeah.
We need you to focus, bro.
I still have a bit of concern as well, just with the end of the year third party tournaments. If anyone even really care about that point, unless they manage to incentivize the really top teams enough to play.
That's another question, isn't it? How do you incentivize the teams?
It won't even matter,
because money.
It's like, bro, it's like trying to get people to the theaters for Black Widow when that comes out after Endgame. No one gives a shit. You know what I mean? It's just no one's trying to watch those tournaments.
Yeah. The biggest. I think if you build it and the teams want to play in it, that will attract the viewership. But the question is, how do you even get the teams to play in it? And if you're making third-party tournaments after champs, that's when a lot of these teams are rebuilding. They're not even going to want to play in these tournaments if it's not scheduled properly to allow teams for the actual rebuilding process to actually begin.
It's also one of the best times, though, to test out rebuilding talent. If you've got a roster and you want to tell whether it's any good, enter it in a tournament. You don't necessarily have to have fully signed somebody to a contract. Sign them to a trial contract, commit to paying them for 2 weeks on a trial basis, and then run it in a tournament and see whether that team does well. I think that's incredibly valuable. And I think it could be really interesting for people. If we get to a system in Valorant where, let's say, the season runs February to September or January to September, something like that, and you have an off season, but the off season is actually a mixture of people reporting on roster moves, potential rosters playing in tournaments, and you can track the teams as they rebuild via tournament success. They play in a Red Bull home ground, or they play in a Blast tournament with slightly different rosters, and you're like, oh, well, they did way better with this player than they did with this player. That could be a really interesting thing for the scene. I could imagine myself following that pretty closely.
Bit of ammunition for it. Do we want to talk about EU? We touched on it ever so slightly because EU is doing something slightly different with the regional leagues that they're setting up for each individual regions, like France, Italy, Spain. It's just set up essentially grassroots leagues, as far as I'm aware, from when I was reading up on it, where they're just going to essentially bring up the talent within those regions to eventually have them play in the major VCT circuit in Europe itself, which they're only doing that in EMEA, as far as I'm aware. Is that the VRL? Is that what that is? That part, that portion? What the? So the first one feeds into Challengers 2. what's going on with the second one?
So wait, what? Sorry. Oh, the second.
You see
one.
the VRL just feeds into the ether, into the void.
Feeds
Last
into
chance
Valorant
qualifier?
logo. And then you can go from Valorant logo to champions.
This is what
I think
confused
that
me
must
about
be
it.
last chance qualifier. It has to
that's
be.
last chance.
Right. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, because it's the same logo as the logo there, and it goes. Okay. This
is also a fan-made thing.
Yeah,
I didn't say that.
I mean, it is quite helpful that
it is helpful to
something
visualize
like this exists because I have such a small mind. Bro.
Yeah, I can't comprehend I agree with you. My brain is like a peanut.
Yeah, so it's going to be open qualifiers for the first one, for getting into challengers, and then after that, there's relegation and promotions from VRLs.
Okay,
that's the idea.
I think that's really dope.
How it carries over into the next year, I don't know. I think it kind of does signal that it will carry over to the next year because why would you establish those leagues without? But it's copying essentially the league system. Well, trying to copy the league system that's pretty successful. I think the VRC also feeds into the VRL, by the way.
That would be pretty dope. Yeah, the VRC, is that only an EMEA? I thought that was part of.
No.
Okay, I would love an amateur league in NA. Can you imagine the content of us lot playing on a team in the Valorant amateur circuit?
We don't need an amateur
That was part
league.
of the video as well, I think, because it started with like Anna Donlin speaking about like all the adjustments to the game and stuff. Like, we're gonna spend a ton of money on esports and observer functions and stuff like that. She also was talking about the clash system that they've been teasing forever, and said that those will have a path to pro.
Sick.
So
I mean, we're all just waiting for that. That is the perfect system if they can create it in a way that functions well. All of these kind of measures are. They're not really stopgaps, but they're like testing out different things that some of them might be irrelevant by the time Clash comes around because that's
we're going
just
hard.
such a good system.
If and when Clash comes out, we're going hard. We're scrimming. The Plat crew is forming a team. We're going hard in the paint. You see these dogs in the yard.
You have to make it mortal first, Bren.
Just know that I'm going upstairs going hard. What?
Sorry, I didn't mean to bring up.
Did you say I have to make it mortal first?
Yeah,
bro. While you've been swirling your wine, eating your toad in the holes, I've been grinding. I've been at the grindstone, solo queuing. By the way, horrible experience. I've been playing Astra. There's nothing worse than playing Astra with no comms. I mean, by the way, we played that one game as well. We were literally in the daddy daycare. We had 2 children on our team.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to get into the rank experience too much.
Don't remind me.
We've been on this topic for far too long.
Well,
it's time
I just want to one final point when it comes to this as well. Just viewing it just from the perspective of a tier 2 team. They were previously eliminated from all of these tournaments after like a week, 2 weeks. They actually now have the ability to play all year. So I think that's a massive advantage. If you're actually thinking about the tier 2, tier 3 teams, this system is way better for them.
Right.
The other really cool thing that we saw at Champs was national teams doing really well. This is incentivizing national teams, not necessarily all, like it's not completely locked.
Annoyed the shit out of me. Literally,
what is that?
Possessed by the ghost of chamber past. Look at this.
It's actually just the floating chamber gun.
I was like, is this a person? Is this a person? And they haven't checked me. Do I shoot this? In my head, I have so many things racing through my head at this moment. I'm like, what? Do I shoot this?
Bro, this game is...
Do I reveal my position? And I'm so distracted by this floating gun coming around the corner. Chamber just peeks and kills me.
The game is fundamentally flawed.
Anyway.
Look at the...
Blood pressure. Rising.
That's pretty funny.
Time to move on.
That's why Let's
move on.
Time to move on.
What, you guys want to talk more about the
let's talk about the post-champions power rankings. This is a big topic. I should have led that in with a bit more hype than just saying, let's just go to the post-champions power rankings. It's very
Wait a
limp.
second. A post-champions power ranking?
Yep.
Of all the Valorant teams?
Yep.
YouTuber face.
Oh, you already know what's going on, Chris. Oh, Jesus Christ. Is that what you're doing with that toad hole the other day?
Oh God. Do we have to really look back at how bad our champions power rankings were?
I think they're deadly accurate. Honestly? Okay, well, Gambit and Liquid, not terrible. Not agree.
I mean, Sentinels and Envy.
Cloud9, perfect accuracy.
Yeah.
Yeah. VivoKeyed actually, pretty spot on.
Well,
Full Sense was definitely
Full Sense rate a little bit too high. Fnatic too low.
Full Sense.
Send way too low.
Actual green square moment. Full Sense.
Full Sense, yeah, proper green square. I feel like we didn't really get to see Vision Strikers at all, so I don't even know if 5 is accurate.
Oh, it's definitely not accurate, man.
I mean, they have to be lower than that, but it's still just so...
We saw, what was it, 6 games in like 6 months?
I mean, they lost a close game to Fnatic and lost a close game to Cloud9. I mean...
Neither of which made it out of the quarters. They can't be ranked.
So they're like...
So lucky,
I think they're
like to be ranked in the top 10.
You got to put them straight into like 9 or 10, though, surely, right? For keeping it super tight against 2 teams in the quarterfinals, maybe?
Should we?
Maybe.
Should we start as efficiently? You want to start at the very tippity top of this?
So is this a power ranking or is this a like ranking the results type of thing?
Let's just power ranking. It's more fun.
All right.
So results.
Then we started top, and Gambit is still number 1.
What time period are you using for that, Balla? Are you talking the
right now? If Gambit played again,
we're doing the thing. We're doing the thing right where it's just how we're just saying how strong they are right now. What we believe in our hearts.
That's why I asked the question.
I think it's more fun when we do that.
I think so too, 100%.
So let's do that.
I was so impressed by Ascend's split, and their bind is still best in world. You know what I'd be really interested in? What would happen if Gambit and Ascend actually played on Haven? I think Gambit would win. I think Ascend were right to ban it against them. I think it's such a weird situation. Someone needs to go into the Gambit camp and just teach them, preach to them that they should play Haven more. And just please don't permaban this map. It works for you. Just get some more practice on it, and you'll be good. And you'll just have a perfectly well-rounded map pool.
We're just doing this based off of if these teams were to play in a tournament right now, what our expectations would be coming off like a champs.
I mean, they did just play in a tournament.
Yep. Okay, but there's another one.
But there's another one today.
Champions 2.
Champions 2. Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with Balla.
You're putting Gambit at number 1?
Yeah.
Get out of there, man. Get out of there. Gambit looked shaky against Vikings and Secret.
Or did Vikings and Secret look like the
I'm
fucking
not convinced.
truth?
I'm not convinced Gambit would have made it past Liquid.
Actually lost to VivoKeyed, so like...
I know. They did look shaky against VivoKeyed. So much so that they lost.
Yeah, VivoKeyed looked a lot better than anybody that Gambit played on their run through.
Personally,
better than Ascend as well.
I would have Ascend right near the tippity top, below Gambit.
Yeah, 100%.
I would have Gambit at number 2, personally.
I think that Ascend proved to me that they are like, they have, I don't know, a wide range, sure, from Berlin to now, but they also will perform at a top level. And they have obviously a very, very high peak. I just think that Gambit showing twice in a row at an international tournament that they'll be fucking consistent as shit, and still go head to head against Ascend in the finals.
I don't think they looked as good as they did at Berlin, though, Balla. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I agree with that. I was very disappointed in the amount of change and other stuff like that, like compositional changes that they had and threw in, because I thought that there was room for that. But they're good on literally 6 maps, and they still had a shit ton of really, really cool stuff that they were able to implement and adapt to. Right? They played such a way. Sure, they didn't necessarily play the best of the best teams, but they played a wide range of different teams. You know, like a massive array. Whereas Ascend, I would probably say it's not that wide of a range.
Well, I feel like Ascend got tested way more early on in the tournament compared to Gambit.
Yes, Gambit's group was easy peasy.
Gambit's group was so easy. Yes.
Yeah.
But then they played Crew, and like, I'd say Crew is probably 3 or 4 here.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably 4, I would argue. But
real quick, Kurt, you might want to change it at the top where it says Power Rankings Champions 2021 to like end of 2021 or something. Just clarification.
Yeah. But I don't think we should be taking the entirety of 2021. I prefer the term post-champions, because taking all of 2021 into account is, I think that's a very different story.
Guys, let's all share our what do we think about the subtitle?
I think power rankings, expectations moving into 2022 and possibly 2023. That's what I think the subtitle should be. Expectations for 2022, and then in parenthesis, potentially 2023.
Okay, Balla, do you have any opinions on the subtitle?
We have to take into account then which teams are going to fold and die before 2023.
Oh my God.
I really hope people are watching this with a drink in hand, like some nice mulled wine or something for the holiday season. Because we are both slow.
My argument for Ascend being a number one is how much. It's so stupid. My argument for Ascend being a number one would just be off the back of them performing when it matters most in Champions, the most important event of the year. My question marks for them coming out of Berlin were, how are they going to perform in a LAN environment? They fixed a lot of their mistakes. They swapped around roles, and they went on an absolute heater. But you still saw the consistent performers performing drastically well at LAN, like cNed and Zeke. I think the team as a whole kind of evolved, and they just found the right timing and the right form, which was champs, and they performed on LAN when, I mean, essentially a lot of expectations against them as well to perform, because I think we were all kind of anticipating. Yeah. You remember midway through champs, we were all kind of expecting at any point it would be probably Gambit and Liquid in the finals.
Yeah, to me, I think the defining factor is that Ascend turned their map pool from being decent into elite, because they probably are the best in the world right now at bind and split. And that isn't because their players are on a heater. That's because they understand the map and have incredible game plans for how to put pressure on their opponents, particularly when they're defending, but also, I mean, on both sides of the map on both maps. And Ascend and Gambit lost their grip on Ascent. That to me also tips it in favor of Ascend, because Gambit previously were just hands down best in the world on that map, and they lost Ascent to pretty much every team they played at Champions. I can't remember if they won it at any point, but they dropped a map in every series throughout their run towards the finals to like Secret, Vikings, X10 Crew. You know, they played the Gambit of the or the Gamut rather of the minor region teams, none of which were pushovers at this event by any means, but their Ascent was looking very shaky,
exposed.
And, that they didn't look the same to me as their kind of flawless run through Berlin. But I mean, personally, I give it to Ascent, but I'm down to put Gambit in that position if you're all.
I think my last argument is just that I still think that they have the best player in the world in Nats, and. Yeah, Ascend have some star power with cNed and Zeke, honestly, but everybody else steps up. Chronicle is fucking insane. Defo stepped up in a massive way. Like, specifically just the players, I just trust them more than I trust like a Starkso and a Bone Cold to stay consistent throughout a year and throughout a tournament. That would happen.
My final argument for Gambit in number one, specifically if we're talking about their strength right now, and if they played a tournament today, I watched Nat's stream while I was eating oatmeal this morning, and he dropped 30 on Breeze as Viper. So I know that he's still in good form, and I trust Gambit to take it.
Okay.
Also, Crew in number 3, because Crew are in number 3.
Crew, not even
but
Crew
also
PM.
No, but also No and Liquid and.
Also,
the Crew PM down the list.
Also, Liquid were good until they took a fat, tremendous Ascend L. And Crew are in third.
Counterpoint to Balla's earlier point, saying Nats is the best player in the world. Like, it stays true to an extent, but it's so hard for now. I'm not going to give you like a counterpoint. Here's the player. No memes. Nats has the unfortunate reality of having a huge target on his back, and essentially the things that really push him above and beyond other players comes from the knowledge and tendencies and his play style, which you can read with enough time. We saw teams really kind of putting a handle on him where he wasn't able to get as much value. In the finals, he managed to perform pretty well. The stats overall of that series were pretty weighted highly, I think, towards Nats because of the one-sided fracture game. So if you take away the fracture game, which, okay, you take it with a grain of salt, he had a pretty good performance overall. But it's only going to be harder in the future, I think, for Nats to live up to the expectations that he set in Berlin. And it does feel like Gambit sometimes do rely on those magical rounds from Nats to just turn shit around. Not all the time. They're a very well-versed team in terms of just, general ideas and how good they are coming into maps. But I just cannot see the same success, the same dominance from them in 2022 when this is the case.
I don't think it is the case anymore, though. I think there's going to be targets on a lot of people's back.
Right? You think because there's more top teams that the heat gets taken away from Gambit?
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to play Gambit until Masters. So it's a complete reset. Whereas Berlin to Champions, everybody was literally looking at Gambit because they're going to play them in Champions. Sure. There's nothing else in between.
And not just that, though, but also Nats kind of was redefining how to play that role. And so people were actively learning from how to play by, almost using him as a tutorial. But I don't think that really matters because the rest of the team stepped up. So I don't think that's an argument to knock Gambit, honestly. I don't think Nats will ever have a performance like Berlin again. It was like a one-off, holy shit, that was a nuts run. But
I don't think so. I think you will. That's just my feeling.
That would be, I mean, that would be crazy.
So Cruz is number 3, though, right?
Okay. So if you want to get on the Liquid, Crew thing, right?
The important team.
Liquid clearly looked like the stronger team coming in. The only knock against them is that they lose that obviously one-sided game against Ascend. But I think Ascend at this tournament were the best in the world on bind and split, and I think split came as a real shock to Liquid at the event. That Ascended up their game that much. You think of Ascend as being this really like loose team where they, trying to play off their individual strength and get value out of their out of cNed, out of Keyless, out of running these reactive plays. Beginning of every round, they'd found an advantage based off some set piece that they'd used to be able to take map control and
extremity control.
Boomed Liquid. You know what it exactly reminded me of was how Liquid lost to Heretics at first strike, actually. It was the same kind of stuff and the same map and the same storyline for Liquid, where they end up not being able to get deep based off one of these teams just coming up with something new for the tournament. I don't hold that as a particular... I don't think that would happen again in the same kind of way, and I think Liquid would be... a nasty matchup. I mean, Liquid dominated Crew at the beginning of the tournament, and I think they would beat them again, and I think they'd potentially have a chance of being able to beat Gambit too, just because they're another team with a really deep map pool that's super well-rounded. I think Ascend peaked hard in this tournament, but Liquid and Gambit remain two of the best teams in the world.
If Crew and Liquid played in that semifinal, Josh, you think Liquid would have won?
I mean, coming into it, yes, I would have predicted Liquid to win, and Liquid won the first time they played against them. The only question in my head is, was that Liquid looking particularly shaky? Did the semifinals get to them? But at the time, I thought that they were choking a bit, but they're also playing Ascender and Bind and Split. Like, they're not favored to win on Bind in any universe ever. I don't know why they let it through the map pool to even begin.
They banned Fracture, right?
Because they're a disadvantaged LCQ team. So, you have to think that way. And they couldn't play Fracture. They couldn't practice it.
Yeah, but Ascender just dog at Fracture, so I don't know. I mean, that's just bad preparation against your opponent, in my opinion, because you've got to...
Well, they didn't play it at that point until, they didn't, right?
Well, they played it in LVP. They played it and showcased, and you could hear their coach comms during LVP, so you knew that they were taking it seriously and scrimming those same comps because of what NBS was talking to them about. So, that's like, is this Sliggy's watching that? He must know that they're a little uncomfortable on Fracture. So, I seriously think that was a large mistake from them. And I think, if they let through a different map in that pool, let's say that they play on, I think Ascent would have been a really cool map to watch those two teams duke it out, something like that. I don't think that Liquid choked as much as Ascend just outright beat them.
Yeah, I think I agree with
I think Liquid... I'd love to hear from the players themselves of whether they thought they choked, but I don't think you can extrapolate Liquid looked poor in the semis to Liquid would have lost against any team in the semis.
Yeah. Comparing to other teams, it's really hard for me not to put them or not to put Liquid above them. I was really disappointed in the semis, and I also in hindsight, I was very disappointed in the quarterfinals against Cloud9. Just and even looking farther back, I think there are abusable holes in their game that is not as comprehensive that we expect based off of the LCQ run and the matches before that, where we're still rating them highly, but they still have to play the field. So yeah, I think I agree with Josh.
I'd be okay. I'm okay with putting Liquid in third.
I like Liquid in third.
If this was a results thing, I'd put Crew in third, but this is not. So
yeah, I like Liquid in third, and then for fourth, I think Crew.
Oh, it has to be.
Yeah. What an ridiculous run from now. I'm not going to rehash the same thing we were talking about when we were talking about champs and just recapping it. But yeah, this team looks like the best, most well-rounded team. Obviously, some reliance on some individual players to have those pop-off moments, but what team doesn't, you know?
Not even that. I mean, they have room to potentially improve the roster too, I think, and they are constantly developing as they push forwards.
Yeah.
So their coach is also a free agent, by the way. He's on the
rumors that he might be going to.
Yeah. No, he confirmed that he's going to Brazil.
Going to Brazil.
Oh, did he? He confirmed that he's going there.
Yeah. I don't think he's that much of a free agent anymore.
Does he speak Portuguese?
Don't know.
Interesting.
Don't know. I don't know the details.
I want to doubt for some reason. I want to doubt that they can do it again just because they only did it one time, really. I mean, we look at the last time and we don't give that much credit anyways, but then I think about how much they were ready for those matches and how much they played under the pressure and how fucking amazing the players played. So yeah, I don't downgrade them. I think this is fine. Fourth is fine.
Yeah. I think now you're in some tough territory.
That single NA team in top 4.
Because
okay,
is it out? I mean,
it's got to be Cloud9, right?
Well, I mean,
expectations for 2022. Cloud9 recently got in Vanity. In the last
Jesus Christ, you're taking the subtitle seriously now.
I know.
Oh no, for real. No, listen. But you're seeing, I can see the future and it looks bright for Cloud9 Blue. I'm telling you.
Honestly, if there were a tournament today and it was just teams playing today, I think I would have Sentinels as the highest NA team.
I think that's cap. I think Sentinels are on their way down as well. You know what I said about the fork in the road that I was talking about before Champions, where we were either going to say, of course Sentinels were going to bounce back, or they're slipping and we should have known that coming out of Berlin, even though it's impossible to know that kind of stuff. I think this tournament, to me, at this event, it seemed like the teams that were the best prepped, that had really worked on either specific maps and grinded them up, had a ton of set plays that they wanted to bring out for crucial rounds. Though that was the difference maker to me between these teams, and Cloud9 had that in spades more than a Sentinels or an Envy team. And even though Sentinels are a cracked group of players,
pound for pound,
I don't think they have that's not the way that they want to play the game. And I think it's going to take some shift in mentality for them to get on that track. I think Cloud9 have that. They understand that aspect of it.
Yeah, this tournament convinced me that Sentinels is not where they need to be. And I was hoping that we'd see like a renewed, I don't know, interest, work ethic, whatever you want to call it, where they looked insane. Not necessarily insane. I still think they looked good. But it's clear that they didn't believe in themselves, I feel like. And some of those.
So? Yeah, I think they definitely did. I mean, Dapper looked like he was coming into it with something to prove off the back of Berlin.
Dapper did, yeah, in certain situations. But Zoms didn't. Sick didn't necessarily. TenZ also, like, disappearing on split over and over and over and over. Like, it just feels like in the beginning of the series, TenZ is like, yeah, sure, whatever. But then as the going gets tough, it's hard for him to switch on, you know? Like they even went head to head against Fury. I almost lost that game. Like very close to losing and throwing that lead.
I think Fury were sick.
I think
we're
Fury
also
were
close
sick too.
I thought Fury were nasty good.
Against
I thought
Liquid.
their whole group was nasty, and I think that the playing split so much was one of the things that really hurt them. And Dapper deserves a lot of credit for his individual performance, but I think any level of doubt in where Shazam should be at in like the rankings of players or how we think about him. I mean, he is still just one of the absolute elite players. And I think he proved that on an individual level. I'm talking about at the tournament.
Yes.
I mean, he was insane. When he played Breach on Fracture, it was as good as it was back in the ancient days. His Breach was nasty, and all the games we played Sova, I mean, he was really on point. I still have faith in Sentinels, and I think that honestly, the map pick playing split too much hurt them, and I still have some faith, honestly, that I think they would perform really well, like again, or could perform better in regards to their actual like placement in the tournament. If this same tournament, if our hypothetical tournament happened again, I think they probably would place higher. I feel like their group was just insane, and they choked and they choked 2 games where they were up by a lot going into the second half and beefed it on split. And I don't think that they should be rated so low because of that. But I'm also not saying they should necessarily be in 5, but I think I think that they could reasonably be the best NA team still. I personally, I would put them as still out of all the NA teams if this was happening again. I think that they're the strongest still
this
right
is an
now.
NA power ranking, but
well, I wouldn't agree with
we were
that.
talking about Cloud9.
I think we have way more data now to say that Cloud9 look better recently. I mean, we didn't get to see Sentinels at LCQ, but Cloud9's LCQ performance, if we're talking about, looking at which looks like the best NA team in terms of their recent form and the path that they're on, that kind of stuff, you've got Cloud9's performance at LCQ. They made it deeper in this tournament as well. And I mean, we would have called it a harder group coming into the tournament. Maybe coming out of it, we have different opinions based on where Crew and Liquid ended up finishing, but it's by no means an easy group. They also started with a really poor performance from their star player, which I think easily would have got them out of their group in first place had Leaf been online, which he was for the rest of the tournament. So it was just that one blip at the beginning.
Swapped places as the tournament went on.
Yeah. So to me, I think Cloud9 have the better strategic basis and enough star power to be on the same kind of level and better recent form. And I think that their trajectory is trending upwards, considering they're a new team too. So
I mean,
I would consider them the de facto #1 team heading into VCT NA 2022.
If we go by Bren's subtitle, I would definitely go with Cloud9. If we go by the expectations of 2022 and potentially 2023, I do believe in Cloud9.
Okay, what if we change the subtitle to Imaginary Tournament Tomorrow?
Yeah.
Power rankings, Imaginary Tournament Tomorrow. I would still have Cloud9 Blue above Sentinels.
Yeah, change that. Imaginary Tournament Tomorrow, parentheses.
Potentially 2023.
No.
yes,
parentheses.
Please, thank you.
Last tournament of 2021.
Yeah. December 31st. Doesn't even fit. It literally doesn't even fit.
That's fine. That's fine. That works.
There we go.
Imaginary Tournament, the Christmas Bash.
We should do something like that.
Perfect.
Lovely.
The last tournament of 202. Back when they were playing Valorant with sticks and rocks.
The upward trajectory of Cloud9 Blue looks solid. I agree with your point though, Wyatt, talking about Sentinels and how I wouldn't expect them if they played in a tournament. I would expect them not to choke away the key maps that they threw away in champs.
What about Sentinels recently would make you confident that they wouldn't choke what they did at Champions? Because this is the point I always try and bring up when people say, oh, that wouldn't usually happen, is I think Sentinels are about their Champions performance is pretty accurate to what you would expect of them in the future. Because if you're saying some of those rounds they had leads and they shouldn't have choked it away, in some of those instances they don't even get those leads. Like some worlds they perform worse than they did at Champions as well, and I think that would have still been a result that we'd sat down and gone, all right, yeah, that was within the realms of expectation. Like, sure, both Sentinels and Envy are going to be difficult to rank on a thing like this because they go up like 8-4 and then they lose both of those maps. I mean, particularly in the Sentinels game against Crew, that's what happened, right? They went 8-4 up in the final 2 maps on Haven and on Split, and they lose both of them. Does that happen in every universe? No, certainly not. If you just give Sentinels an 8-4 half and tell them to play the second half, they're surely going to win the majority of them, even against a Crew that's in form like that, because it's just such a big advantage. But I think there's also many worlds in which they don't even generate that 8-4 half to begin with, so it ends up being pretty similar anyway.
My reasoning is because watching Sentinels, with the power of hindsight looking at Berlin, I'd say that was a whole team underperformance. Like the whole team's... The narrative that's going around right now where the NA teams aren't putting in as much practice, I would have said that for Sentinels in Berlin is my general undertaking. If I watched their performance... that would have been what I attached to it. Coming into this tournament, I don't think they played too poorly. They definitely choked away their leads, though, on maps that they should have won. Against, though, opponents like Crew, where Crew were on a bit of a heater. I think Crew came into unbelievable form. They're definitely one of those rare teams that get tempered by the high expectations and the pressure of the biggest tournament of the year. Some teams flop in those circumstances. Some teams absolutely shine and go above and beyond. And... that would be my expectation. If there was a tournament played tomorrow, Sentinels would still be near the top. I'm not saying my argument is still for Cloud9 to be above, but I do agree with Wyatt that I think, I don't know, Sentinels, I would still anticipate them to be a top team in the overall power rankings in a top tournament as well, with all the other top teams.
I mean, are there any other teams that you guys feel are relevant to put in 5?
No.
The other ones that would be in the conversation are Envy and Fnatic, and they'd both be behind Cloud9 and Sentinels,
what about
in
X10?
my opinion.
No, I mean...
I don't think that they deserve a 5th spot.
Enough.
They obviously played really good, but not 5th coming out of the
whimsy.
entire tournament, I don't think.
I agree. Well, what do you guys want to settle on? I'm okay with either.
I want Cloud9, personally.
I mean, if all three of you want Cloud9, you can do Cloud9.
Yeah,
I'm okay with Cloud9 too. I think it's on the edge. I just would.
And I would have Sentinels behind.
Well, I do want to start having the conversation though about Envy and Fnatic, because I think those are the teams breathing down Sentinels next. And to me, the performance from Envy was similar to Sentinels. You could argue worse because of the teams they played against, right? Yeah. Envy, in theory, have a much easier group to be able to get through. They only have to get through an X10 to be able to, well, sure, the champions, but X10 should be their ticket out of groups, and they weren't able to do that. And I think I was more impressed by Crew than I was by X10. So I think, comparing the two teams, I think Sentinels' fuck up, if you want to put it like that, is more forgivable than Envy's coming out, especially considering Envy's prior tournament result was making it to the finals and looking like a killer team. And I think you do have to put Fnatic in that conversation to start sniffing around the 6th or 7th because of what they clearly bring a different level when it comes to LAN play. And they're probably the best team in the world, or at least they were the best team out of the teams that they faced, both Fracture and Icebox. Now, I don't think I'd go so far as to say they're the best team in the world at both of those maps. I think that's yet to be decided for Fracture and probably up in the air for Icebox as well. But they're damn good at both of those. But that was the only map they won throughout Champions.
Was Fracture?
No, both of those maps. Sorry, Fracture and Icebox were the only maps they won throughout their run.
I mean,
am I right in thinking?
Icebox too, right? Against Vision Strikers? They lost an Icebox?
Yeah, I don't mean that they had 100% win rate, though. I mean, what was their... What did they win?
I don't think that's true. I'm pretty sure they beat Vision Strikers on Icebox.
Yeah, they beat Vision Strikers on Icebox and Fracture.
Oh, it's
and then they lost Haven.
They won. Yeah, they won every Icebox and Fracture game and lost on any other map.
Every other map. Although their Havens were close. Their Havens still
and the splits were close too. They were close, but they didn't win any of them.
Yeah.
So it's tough because again, then it's like I don't want to discredit them because they did turn up and they're they're one of the teams that remind you of why it's important to have LANs and games on the stage, because there are players that thrive in that environment, and it should be the environment where players are rewarded the most for being good, not online. And they're a reminder of that, and they played really well, and also they were clearly, I think they had to have been at least in like the top 2 Fracture teams. It's either them or Gambit, right? So and I think they deserve a lot of credit for innovating on that map in a way that was actually effective.
Possibly Sentinels, actually. I don't want to rule them completely out, because that Sentinels Fracture map was nasty, but I'll concede that they only played one map. So it's
just kind of tough, because we only saw it once, but that is fair too. But I think, Fnatic deserve a lot of credit. Durka deserves a lot of credit, but it is tough looking at this run retrospectively, knowing how the maps went down, and knowing that both Cloud9 and Vision Strikers allowed Icebox and Fracture through against Fnatic.
That is very fortunate. But also, Icebox tends to get floated because most teams don't feel particularly strong about it. I feel like it's
and Fnatic love it. I mean, Fnatic love even online, that was still the map where you could trust Durka to get like 20 plus every time, even when they were.
But if you ran a tournament tomorrow, if you actually ran a tournament tomorrow, nobody lets Fnatic get Fracture and Icebox.
No, they have to.
I mean, apart from maybe Gambit, who like playing.
Yeah, they get one. They'll get one of them, and they have a strong shot at beating any team on either of those maps. But where does that put them in the rankings? It's tough. They get a high spot, but
personally, I would say that if I was throwing teams up there, it'd be Sentinels, Envy, Fnatic to me, because I think Envy's run at Berlin was monstrous, but it was also one of those tournaments where your star player goes crazy. I mean, that was an even better than online Yay performance, and I'm not sure where Envy's at if Yay doesn't put up that kind of performance. And I think this was one of those tournaments where he didn't dominate the games that he was in. He had some maps where he played really well, and he had some where he went missing a little bit. It was much more of a normal Jett performance rather than an otherworldly, Yay's a freak kind of thing. And, Victor wasn't particularly putting stuff up, but all that to say that I wouldn't have them above Sentinels. And that run at Berlin, I think, shouldn't be expected to be replicated with a level of consistency. But I think that, coming off the fact that they still look decent at Champions, doesn't put them all the way into the doldrums. And I think their recent form has been looking better than Fnatic before Champions. I feel like they have to be ranked above them.
I think if we let Sentinels slide because of this tournament's performance, you also have to let Envy slide a lot more in terms of giving them excuses, right? Because we talked about what a weird situation they were. They didn't even get to play line. They didn't even get to play on the stage. The faults though for them are drastic enough that I'm comfortable putting them behind Sentinels, but I don't want to, just because for me it's so fixable. Their prep going into the tournament to leave Fracture as their permaban, and to not to me that's unforgivable, to not play the new map heading into this when you have plenty of time to do it, when you're already out of all the champs. Exactly. And that costs them against probably a lot of different. I mean, I haven't gone back to the vetoes, but specifically Ascend, right? Going against them on bind and whatnot, because you have to ban Fracture. It's just weird. And honestly too, to make the decision not to just let Fracture float, and maybe, hey, Ascend wants to go for it, then that's fine, because then you're not playing them on bind,
I think they also went backwards in some of the stuff that Envy was doing. I think that their Ascent default setups on defense looked significantly worse than when they were running them at Berlin. I think the positions that Victor were playing looked uncomfortable for him to try and play. He wasn't really playing to be with Yay very much, trying to have that 1-2 punch for the team. He was playing much more across with Crashies instead, with some really weird setups. I remember on defense, they had a set play where they were pushing Victor and Crashies out for gelato control. So they're pushing aggressively. I think this must have been against Ascend when they played against them. And they're like pushing on defense with Victor's sky flashes and a recon dart, trying to challenge those areas. And the game plans that they had concocted didn't look effective. They looked like they'd gone backwards compared to Berlin, not just in terms of form, but in terms of their game plan too. Their composition is, I think, worse when it comes to their icebox play. They've just kind of gone back to meta stuff when they were one of the teams pushing the innovation forwards. It just and those are not like, oh, it'll be fixed again tomorrow if we run another tournament. It was just people having a shaky day. That's like you've made those decisions that have made your team worse.
Yeah. And that's why I would put them like if it wasn't for that, I feel like they have an excuse to stay up, but they don't because they clearly made some bad decisions.
Willing to cut them some slack just because of the whole Victor playing in quarantine deal.
And was he actually sick?
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even at that
though
too.
He was talking about it on stream. He was actually sick.
Oh well, that does change things. Then. I actually didn't think he was sick. I thought he just tested positive, but wasn't ill.
But I would still have Fnatic above Envy because of the reasons you just said so eloquently,
I would,
Josh. Like
I think I would
even
too.
though Fnatic only won on 2 maps.
Yeah, I think Fnatic did get quite fortunate in terms of the way the map pick bans worked for them, like in their games leading up to this point. But you cannot discredit how much the whole team is just animals. Just that step up in performance that the whole team gets. Whereas Envy on Berlin, not lived and died, but like holy moly, they looked like they were unreal off the back of Ye really dominating and performing well. And then this Envy just looked weaker. I mean, you put it best. I'm not going to rehash your points, but something changed from Berlin to now. There was a step backwards in terms of just their understanding of how to play certain maps, and you also had the combined factor of Ye also not putting up those ridiculous numbers that I don't know if we'll ever see again. Ye still put up very good numbers, but to the point where he was 1v4ing rounds, we didn't really see, you know?
They had some, I still think Envy individually, some of the other players were still playing really well. Marv was playing really well.
Yeah, I thought Marv played well.
Individually, FNS was playing really well too.
Yeah.
And they lost against an X10 who were in rare form. I mean, they were just in pretty unbelievable individual form. Even a step beyond that. And it does feel wrong to have Envy so low, but I feel like you kind of have to, even despite the circumstances with Victor. I want to cut them some slack for that, but it's tough because are you really going to put them above Fnatic, who actually beat a team ranked above them on this in Cloud9 and beat Vision Strikers, another solid opponent, and actually made it to the quarterfinals and took a map off Karoo and lost the series with close scores on other maps against all the teams that they had lost maps to? But you would put them below Envy, who had a bad pick ban against Ascend and got rolled on one of the maps and just lost 0-2 and lost to X10. I think you have to put Fnatic in 7th, and it feels wrong to have Envy this low, but I think that's
let me pose you this question though, Wyatt. If you run a tournament tomorrow and Fnatic plays against Envy, and Envy knows, that Fnatic are good on Icebox, Fracture, and Victor's not sick, who in your head wins that game? You've got, normal performance out of Victor, and Envy get, let's say they get rid of Fracture, right? I mean, Envy don't want to play Fracture anyway, so they get rid of Fracture.
They'd definitely be playing on Icebox. Icebox would be in that series. Would Ascent be in? I don't know. My brain is operating at such a slow pace. I can't think of the maps, but I mean, it's tough. I mean, I would assume Fnatic are going to win Icebox, and then Envy would have to win whatever the other 2 maps are at that point. Could they do that? Absolutely. Yeah, they absolutely could.
You're looking at probably, let's say it was something like Bind and Ascent, something like that, right? Or like Bind Haven, maybe, because Fnatic wanted to play Haven quite a lot.
Yeah.
Well, they would pick Icebox, right? Oh, you're
sorry.
talking about
I'm saying the other two maps. Yeah, the last two maps. Because I'm with Wyatt that I think the first map is probably negative Icebox.
Yeah,
but
you just
to me, I think in a situation like that where Victor's healthy and they're banning Fracture against Fnatic, I think Envy are favored to win that match. Even so, I think it's relatively
I think it's
even,
a good matchup, but like I don't think that's in the essence of the power ranking, anyways. But my argument would be that I think that Envy has shown and can prove that they can go deep in a tournament, whereas I think Fnatic literally didn't feel like they could play up to that pressure. That was how I thought that semi or that quarterfinal against Crew went. Right, it was them falling under the pressure, not necessarily choking, and you could say whatever word you want, but I feel like the creativity got them stuck in a lot of positions where you have to be able to work on the fly, and I think that's still a big problem for them, especially in Haven even, and obviously the split map against Crew. Whereas I don't think I'd ever see Envy fall into that sort of situation where they get lost in the weeds of their.
No, I mean, I thought Envy were a lock. I mean, I said it on an episode before the event that I thought Envy were like a semi-final lock because they have they've made every top 4 of everything. They always make top 4 of everything at the very least. And I trusted that consistency. So
that's why I think you give them the benefit of the doubt, though. That's where my brain goes for, like, you've got to.
I know, but you know what the problem is? I do want to give them the benefit of the doubt because they have made the top 4 of everything else, and still individually they had some great performances. They could very well bounce right back and be the best team in NA again, in the minds of the community, right? I think that's very possible, but then also it feels like there's some level of Fnatic. Not disrespect, but like
I'm
downplaying again.
I'm done disrespecting
some Fnatic downplaying.
Why? They play 7th to 8th. Like,
I know.
How is this disrespectful? Like this
to put them,
but just thinking
to put them
about
below 2 teams that didn't make it out of the groups feels it. You know what it is? It just looks visually seeing it. It's it doesn't feel right. But
if it was one team, would it change your mind though?
The thing is, I do think they should be.
Sentinels is too high.
I don't think so personally.
Okay, all right. I don't think I made an argument here for Sentinels being too high. I think that if it's based off of their performance and how they looked, I think I agree with the number 6, right, above these teams and probably below the rest of the teams. But I think that their performance showed that they won't be as good anymore. That's kind of the 2 in a row, Berlin and now this, and all the circumstances surrounding this team. I think that we're at the end of the road where we like Josh said, we're going to see them start to decline. And everything that happened at this tournament, to me, just all the talk, all the content, the interviews that they gave, everything is telling me that I should not feel good about this team. So I have to downgrade them based off from their performance, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. See, the thing is, I do agree, but I don't think the decline is yet. If they're starting to maybe go downhill, they're just going downhill a little bit. They're still pretty high up.
The decline has happened. The decline is happening. Literally, they didn't make it out of groups, right? Like Berlin 8th place, and then now they don't make it out of groups. Like, how is that not the decline happening? How is that not literally?
No, I'm saying it is happening. It's just that they haven't declined that far yet.
There still would be 8th or something like that. That's still fucking good in the world. Like, that's still good.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're getting lost in the weeds.
To me, I just don't feel confident about any 3 of these teams.
I don't either.
Sentinels, Envy, Fnatic. I think.
Good point.
You really don't feel comfortable about any of them?
I wouldn't bet the house on them making semis in a tournament coming up. I don't feel like any of them are going to bounce back immediately unless the Envy performance was massively to do with Victor, and from watching their game plan, I don't think it was entirely because of that.
Yeah.
So Envy are the one that I'm willing to give the most the most credit to, the most bail, but also via the actual stuff that they were doing in the game, some of that I think was causing the issues, not just Victor being sick. So I don't think it would get fixed overnight. So I don't feel great about any three of these teams. So I'm, put them where you like.
I want
put the
Fnatic
Child's
at
Game
7.
teams in the list and let's keep it moving.
I want Fnatic at 7 and Envy at 8.
Hours.
That's what I want. That's my thought process with this one. All right.
I would swap Sentinels and Envy, and that's how I'd end it. But
swap Sentinels, dude. Yeah.
I don't even.
We're gonna come blow. We're gonna be starting fights in a car park soon. What
do you want to do? Okay, what do you want to do with this Vivo Keyed? Let's just for a moment stoke the fires of pain within Wyatt's heart. If Vivo Keyed actually played like they did at the beginning of the groups, I think they would have gone really deep. I think they looked absolutely sick. Can you give them any credit for that? Can they even be ranked on a list like this?
Well, it is an imaginary tournament tomorrow. So, yes, you can.
But does it make sense with the team, I mean, potentially getting torn apart for pieces in Brazil, and the fact that, I mean, the way in which they went out is so unusual.
It was because it's the kind of thing that I was talking about, where teams will go to LAN and you will overperform, which it looked early on. But as soon as the going gets rough and there's something that cracks mentally, is it your interview with Heat, right, Josh? You did a losers interview, and the guy was talking about how some of the team members just gave up on Vivo Keyed. That's not the mentality. That's not what you need from your teammates. You're going into any sort of tournament to compete against the very best in the world, because it means you're going to have massive fluctuations in your performance and form. And
some unique mental circumstances, though.
Exactly. Who's not going to fucking falter when faced with what they ended up doing? It's their fault. Don't get me wrong, but like.
I do think it's a bit weird, though. Like I really expected Vivo Keyed to, because I think people react in different ways, and I thought from the outward appearance of those guys and how they'd communicated with themselves on Twitter and stuff, not all of the team, but some of the team, that they'd have a fire to kind of prove everybody wrong.
They did in the rematch. They did.
They did in the rematch, but then they didn't carry that into the games that actually mattered, which I thought that was the big disappointment, because when you're tested with adversity, it either strengthens or cracks people. What's it's steel. You're either cold steel or hard steel, and they cracked.
It's talking like a Brandon Sanderson novel.
Exactly. I think that is a quote from Brandon Sanderson, isn't it? Or maybe somebody else. It's like, it is a fantasy quote.
I think that Ascend literally played with their mental so fucking hard by letting that go the distance and letting them use their fire, right? Use that chip on their shoulder. They used it all and they lost, and then that crashes you. You've all been brought up to some high point where you're like, holy fuck, this is really gonna happen. And then you get crushed, and then you can't bring it back. That's what happened in my estimation.
You need somebody in the team, though, after that initial match, with the entire fucking blunder of waiting too long, so none of the teams getting good prep in terms of understanding who they were going to play against. You need somebody on Vivo Keyed to step aside, take the team to one side and say, listen, lads, listen, we know we're better. We know we're the best team in the group. We know we're fucking good. It doesn't fucking matter. Let's run it back in the lower bracket right here, right now. We know we're one of the best teams at this tournament. But that got lost somewhere, and they had one of the most radical transformations in form that I saw at the tournament, going from looking like they could pound most teams into dust to just only half the team showing up.
It was the difference between having the weight of a country on their shoulders versus the joyous whimsy of X10, who had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
Which is why X10 should probably just be in 9th, to be honest. I mean,
all that
even though
said,
I think I still, in an imaginary tournament, I would still rate Vivo Keyed highly, and I think that they would make it deep. But I think it's fair to also think that X10 are capable of the same thing, given what we saw, and we saw it. And they, they managed to beat
Envy. One thing
Envy.
is confirmed, though. X10 is not having Patapen, and without Patapen, they're not nothing, but they're not top 10.
Oh, that's a good point. I mean, yeah, I guess in this imaginary tournament, Patapan is already playing Overwatch, so
He turns up and he just plays Overwatch next to them.
It does negatively affect them that he's in.
I mean, Ascend might be losing players. Are we working off of? Ascend might be losing cNed.
Rumor, whereas X10 is literally passive. Like he's gone. Like
Fnatic lost
also, I think
Doma.
I think that's out the window. The cNed thing. I'm pretty sure it seems like he's
don't overthink it, boys. Don't overthink it.
Don't overthink it.
Like,
but Ball's right. We know Patapan's gone. We know he's playing Overwatch. He said X10 cannot perform well.
Well, let's assume that
imaginary tournament.
He signs a temporary contract and plays for X10 again.
Okay.
I want to work off that
Christmas
assumption.
bash.
Yeah, and I would genuinely.
Yeah.
Here's how I would put it. This is gonna. You guys are gonna scream at me for this. Vision Strikers at 9, X10 at 10. Because we haven't talked about Vision Strikers yet, but I think
let's have a conversation about Vision Strikers then. How good did they actually look at this tournament?
I think they played against Fnatic, that was their first match, right? Vision Strikers Fnatic.
No, first match was Vision Strikers Full Sense. They wiped the floor with Full Sense.
Gotcha. And then they played against Fnatic when Fnatic were looking like way better than we were anticipating. And then they had the unfortunate reality of running into Cloud9 Blue off the back when Leaf had finally got his act together.
Yeah.
I think their group was actually really hard. And I think that if they were, for example, in the Gambit...
They didn't play well. When people are when we were thinking about Vision Strikers, we were thinking this might be an elite team. No one was saying they're gonna win the tournament. That's not what we were preaching. But we were saying there's a chance that this team is incredibly good. We just haven't seen enough of them to be able to tell. And so this tournament should be the measuring stick by which you adjust those expectations coming out of Berlin, because we'd only seen them play against like 5 top teams across 6 months. So from what you saw in this game, you know, they wiped the floor with Full Sense. All right, they move on to their game against Fnatic, and to me, the big standout thing from the game against Fnatic was how poor their fracture looked compared to what they could have been showcasing. I mean, it just looked like they had not put. I'm sure they have put time into it, but none of that translated into actual success at all. I mean, they looked completely limp. They just got rolled by Fnatic on it. Sure, Fnatic are a good team, but in theory, so could Vision Strikers be.
Yeah, I think on that map too, though, it displayed their inability at times to change mid-game.
Yes.
They were just getting boomed by the same Fnatic hits over and over with the same set utility pieces, and there was just no defensive adaptation with the setup. Specifically, I think one of the things I wanted to say about Vision Strikers, and I think it applies to that, is that I think some of the individual performances that were really red hot at Berlin, like for me, King, he wasn't there for them this time. And I think that like on that Fracture map in specific, he was just getting steamrolled by Durka, and there was just no ability to adapt mid-game from him. And I just don't, I think in general, I thought at Berlin, he was one of the elite Sentinel players there to me. But here at Champions, I don't think he had as good of a performance. I think the player from Vision Strikers who remained elite was Mako, and other than him, I didn't see the same. I felt like, at least to my eyes, I didn't see the same firepower as I did at Berlin at this tournament. Honestly, from I think all 4 of the other guys, they were okay. They were fine, but I don't think any of them were bringing the serious heat that they were bringing at Berlin.
Yeah, I felt like Stax was the only guy who turned up compared to stagnated.
Yeah, I thought Stax played pretty well as well, but also Stax is the IGL, and I think a lot of the issues with how they actually performed were IGL issues as well. So I don't want to, go tooting Stax's horn when a lot of that responsibility is also on his shoulders too. Like, for example, I'm thinking about their game against Cloud9. I mean, when Cloud9 have got such an atrocious attacking half on Ascent, if you can't put up more than 1 attacking round as well, then you've tossed the map. I mean, Of course, you have under any circumstances, you've tossed the map if you can only put up 1 attack in half. But Cloud9 are like one of the teams where you only need to put up like 3 or 4, please. And they couldn't even get 2 together. And they just looked, they looked like they had not developed. They were still a team that's half-baked. They've got some awesome shit, but not enough to be able to go deep, not enough for me to be able to have confidence in them being an elite contender. And I think X10 showed the more well-rounded game, honestly. I'd have them ranked above Vision Strikers.
I would too.
Fine with that.
I think X10 deserves this spot. Then after that,
VivoKid or Vision Strikers.
I also think there's an argument for Furia. I was really impressed by Furia. And I think that that's another case of, I mean, they went out really early, but they played a really close series against Sentinels. They played a really close series against Crew. And I think they showed, I mean, kind of the exact opposite of what I was just criticizing Vision Strikers for, where they were really good at adapting even just within rounds, finding effective ways mid-round to change their gameplay and use the utility in a creative way to take space somewhere, find and execute off of it. I thought their team play was excellent. I was really impressed by Furia, and I think that they just kind of ended up, you know, floating under the radar because they went out in last in their group, but they had 2 really close games where they were playing really impressively. I really might. I think it's viable to have Furia in 10, but
I agree with you, but my problem with a lot of these the regions that we don't watch enough or watch a lot of is that we don't have the insight of like how they. Well, I guess it's not even that we don't watch a lot of them because we watch them, but they aren't playing against the same type of competition. For example, X10, they didn't play that much at all. But even if they were, like, we don't get that same knowledge of how they're performing regionally. So for Furia, like, if you actually use the knowledge of what they did in Challengers Finals or LCQ and before that, you're like, this is not that good of a team. And then they overperform here. And now, are you really giving them all the credit and putting them in like a 10th place here? Or are you going to use that old factor? Because I think they overperformed way higher. I think that they've shown that peak locally, but I still think that they overperformed what they're normally doing. Like what they did at LCQ and what they did in Challengers.
I do agree with that to an extent. I was very surprised by how good Furia looked at the event. I didn't really have expectation for them in their group, and I thought that they were excellent. And it to me was so much due to really good mid-round calls. And it wasn't just a flash in the. It didn't feel at least like the kind of classic flash in the pan. We're hitting all of our shots, but it was just really good team play, really good mid-round calls, and creative utility usage in mid-rounds. That was so impressive to me. I guess I suppose it's
a creative team. And they're a very creative team that were cool to watch, but I don't think it was as effective as Vision Strikers or especially VivoKid. I think VivoKid, when they were playing well, were clearly the best out of these 3 teams. But then it comes down to like how do you actually rate them based on what they did, you know, when they kind of flopped afterwards. But I think Furia were really interesting in what they did. But even the maps, some of the maps that I was most impressed with, some of their ideas, they still ended up losing like 13-8. You know, they weren't actually in it with a good shot of being able to win. Whereas, you know, if you think about the Vision Strikers game, stuff like that, they were much closer to being able to get it out of the groups than somebody like Furia was, even against similar competition. And VivoKid arguably should have got out of the groups had they not used a camera.
Yeah. I think VivoKid are reasonable to have in 10th. I think Vision Strikers are reasonable to have in 10th. Any chance you guys would want to have Secret in 10th?
No.
I don't think so, but just bringing their name up for the sake of bringing it up because they did make quarterfinals.
Yeah, for anyone who's, if there are any Secret fans out there saying, why aren't you putting them in the group? They beat Crazy Raccoon and Vikings.
Yeah.
So that's the reason.
They beat them in impressive fashion. I mean, I think they'd be, you know, they're definitely a good team, and they definitely defied expectations, and I'm excited to see more of them. But yeah, I don't think they've done enough to earn themselves onto a top 10 world spot yet.
Agreed. I would put Vision Strikers or VivoKid in 10th. And then I'd give Furia and Team Secret an honorable mention if I was to round this out.
I think that's pretty fair.
I'd like to put VivoKey there perfectly. Personally, I think X10 being on the list without Padipan is already enough of a fudging it a little bit. So VivoKey being on 10th, to me, obviously you're fudging it because it's like we're kind of thinking about the world in which VivoKey kept their passion to compete and actually, motivation at an all-time high, and maybe the riot ruling didn't happen or something like that. In fact, we're underrating them in that kind of world, I would argue.
Yes,
probably. But I think this
we're doing a little bit of fudging with the results, and so I think the 9th and 10th spots are a bit of a fantasy, but more to do with the form we actually saw from them when they were playing properly.
Yep, sure.
Okay, cool. Let's lock it in. Let's save it. Imaginary tournament tomorrow.
Subtitle.
Imaginary tournament tomorrow. Last one on 2021.
Nice.
I like it. That's going to make for a fantastic screenshot. The next topic, we spent a long time on those power rankings as well. We're moving on briskly now. It's winter. You can use terms like briskly. I associate that with winter mornings usually. Has any team started an era? What a transition period.
No.
No. Well, moving on. That's the topic of it. No.
I would argue that Sentinels has started an era in NA, and I don't think that it's stopped yet. But no international era. That's it.
It's still in flux a little bit. I mean, there's an argument to be made for Gambit, no? Off the back of winning Berlin and making it to the finals and champs. Like, the Gambit could absolutely go on a run and create a bit of a dynasty as far as their org is concerned.
I think the only team that you could argue, if we are living in an era, it would be the Gambit one, but you can't say that until it's finished.
But
really, or at least
started.
Until it's a lot deeper.
Started, right?
Well, not really, because if they just bomb out from now on, then it wasn't. Never was.
But I mean, like the question is, has any team started? We don't know until it finishes, but we're proposing questions here, no? We're proposing teams.
Sure. I think the argument for Gambit is there from what they've done in Berlin and from Champions, but Balla, what would you want to see from Gambit?
What is happening? I've never had this problem before ever. And Josh comes on the show with this childhood computer.
I've installed viruses into the video software.
Sorry, what was it?
I let my sister use my PC for a second, and this is what happened. Now, I'm saying, if what would you need to see from Gambit across early 2022 for you to say that it is a Gambit era? If they're the team that's closest or could potentially be at the very beginnings of one here, what do you think is necessary for it to be a Gambit era heading into 2022?
Well, for me, an era is literally an unstoppable period of time, right? And for that to happen, they need to win multiple tournaments. So I'd have to see them win Masters 1 for me to say, okay, this is a start of an era. Like, maybe, right? But other than that, there's nothing else that would make that happen. I think that they're a good team right now in this time period, and they probably are the team closest to starting an era. Like, if Ascend won the next one, I still would be like, oh, okay, like that. This is where Gambit is pretty much. But that'd have to be it. The only thing.
Is it fair to think about Sentinels as a team with their era beginning somewhere in 2020 and then ending with Reykjavik?
Possible, but it was essentially domestic apart from that final one. So I think, if you dial the clock forwards 2-3 years, it wouldn't even be considered valid.
People wouldn't
because
be
of the lack of LAN tournaments. Yeah. You could raise it for sure, and you might argue that it's got to the end of it, but I don't think it would even count as a real one.
It looked like you had a bug on your face.
Did you have a what? What was that?
No, it was just a graphical glitch.
I've
just been wiping my.
I've just been wiping
coming
my
out
face
of you? To get them off.
Oh,
Men in Black.
I mean,
actually,
that was interesting. I mean, this is one of those topics that you do on a discussion show about esports because it's like an esports discussion show topic in other games, but we're too early into the game to have one yet.
Yeah. The reason I
unless the
suggested
team won
is because
everything this year, but no team did that.
Well, the reason that I added it though was because I think it was DDK that posted a tweet saying Sentinels have started an era or something when they won Reykjavik, having won, Masters won domestically and that kind of thing. And I'm sure people will bring it up, like the idea that it's the Gambit era or something like that. So I wanted to get your take on, maybe a more balanced approach to using the term. And frankly, I wanted to ask just the panel of experts we have here: is an era even possible within the VCT system? Green Square.
That is a good question.
Is an era possible within VCT when you only have 3 events? If you don't have a lot of events occurring regularly, what would even the criteria be? Would you have to win like 3 out of 4?
Actually,
of them
you'd have to win all of them.
Win them all forehead. I mean, actually, just win them all.
You'd have to be the dominant team over the course of a year.
That's like a grand slam. Like that's the kind of thing that tennis players maybe get once in their entire career, and they're individuals. For a team to be able to do that would just be somewhat ridiculous. That period of dominance. That's like the Intel Grand Slam actually that they run in CS. How many times has that been completed? Twice, I think.
Twice. Liquid and Astralis.
Yeah. But I think, listen, that's how it should be. Should be a rare, a rare type of team to be able to establish a full era.
Yeah. And my frame of reference comes from Counter-Strike, where I would be very hesitant to label era. So maybe that hurts because VCT doesn't support that. But I mean, what's your frame of reference in terms of eras? Like, has there ever been an era in Overwatch or TF2 or any of those esports?
I would say so. 2019.
In TF2, yeah.
In TF2.
About a 7-year era. I don't know about Overwatch.
But it is rare for a team to just have dominance over the course of a year. It's so rare that you that's the criteria of what you should be labeling it, I think, is
I think an era is always has to be multiple years. Because otherwise it's just the year of Gambit or some shit like that.
Sure.
Like why
I suppose, yeah. How long were how long was the Astralis run or the Liquid run?
2 to 3 years. Liquid was like a year and a half.
Yeah, Liquid was not incredibly long, but I mean they won the 4 major tournaments, so it lasted
pretty crazy.
I'd argue it's easier to have that level of consistent performance when your game doesn't go through as many changes. I mean, maybe this is my ignorance on the CS scene, but the fundamentals of the game, like it's not like they're adding new agents. You know what I mean? Like, the game doesn't change as drastically compared to other titles, so it becomes easier for a team to have a level of consistent dominance, no?
Essentially. I think the other part about that as well is the more events you have, the more leeway you can give somebody for coming second in one.
Yeah.
In VCT, if you come second in one of the tournaments, that might be a crippling blow to how we consider, like, whether we consider you the best team in the world, because we only have one data point. If you place first in all of the majors, apart from one where you place second, you're probably still an absolutely dominant team in CS. If you were doing that in some third-party stuff as well.
Which I do think gives credence to, if there's any team that could potentially maybe establish the first era, it would be if Gambit continue to win from here. And then we would maybe look at the second place against Ascend as the one-off second place.
Yeah.
But if they continue to win out,
here's a
Gambit
question.
could be the first. But other than them, I don't really see another team that could do it, unless, I guess, Ascend just win from here. But
if Gambit went on next year to go top 4, win champs for 2022, would that be considered an era?
Because if they do what?
If they go top 4, win champs, would that be considered an era for them?
I think it's too short, personally. But I don't know. I think perhaps we might have to invent our own.
From Berlin to champs.
Oh, you mean until next champs?
Yeah, I'm talking next champs.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Well, then, yeah, probably.
Yeah. Anyway, let's wipe that off. It's an interesting conversation topic, but I think we're all in agreement. It's, it sparks an interesting discussion, but there's nothing concrete we can really talk about.
We'll decide who has the first era.
Exactly. You'll hear it
not yet
from us.
Yeah. We'll let you know when it's
Stay tuned. Make sure you watch every episode of Plat and VALORANT, all 4 hours of the future episodes. Otherwise, you might miss it when we declare the era has begun. And I don't really know how to transition into this next topic. Josh is gone again? Nope, he's back. There's something crazy going on with the internet in the UK right now. They shutting down the communication lines over there?
Oh, I've got a story to tell you about the internet here, by the way. Every time I turn up to my parents' place, the internet doesn't work, right? Every time I come, every year when I come back, something wrong with the internet. It comes up with DNS errors all over the place, all over the place. Figured out. Hello. Oh, good night. Her fault, by the way. It was her fault, actually.
Who was that?
That was my mum. So what I found out is that she's tried to install some parental controls to limit the amount that my brother's on the internet, so it only locks him into like 3 hours a night or something. And she couldn't figure out the MAC addresses and how they worked, so she added every device she could find that wasn't hers to this like blocker that only limited you to 3 hours. So I was working, and then at the 3 hour mark, it would just cut off. I was like, what's going on with the internet connection? Why is it only my computer that doesn't work? How can this be? And she was like, oh, I don't know. I haven't changed anything. Like, come on. You've done something.
But that is actually technically impressive as hell.
Yeah.
To lock out MAC addresses.
Yeah. Was this happening every year?
Yeah. Oh, she set it up years ago, and I've only just found out about it, and I undid it all.
Oh my god! So every time, okay. Well,
you must have been dreading going home. No wonder you lost your freaking passport.
The next topic we've got is it's a reoccurring story. People posting rumors, reports. I saw a deleted tweet earlier today. Because the rumor was that cNed would be
deleted.
It was deleted. Yeah, the rumor was there was a tweet that somebody put out about cNed, and the topic we got is where should cNed go? Because there's all this talk. The 100 Thieves fans are clamoring for a scrap of news. They really want to see the 100 Thieves cNed. They want 100 Thieves a lot of things. To be fair, they want 100 Thieves the world. I think.
Yeah,
100 Thieves
would be nice.
Exactly, everyone.
Hook.
Me included in that one. But there was the rumor posted. It got a bit of traction, and it was deleted. I think a couple of hours later, the tweet was deleted saying that cNed was close or like starting the signing process, I suppose, to re-sign with Ascend. So clearly that news was kind of incorrect, and it's still kind of up in the air where cNed might go. Now that might change from when this episode gets published, but for now we can talk about it.
I mean, first of all, I would hope he just stays with Ascend.
Yeah.
Because it would be unfortunate if the champion team not disbanded, but, lost their star player. It changes the dynamic of the team. And then we'll never really see the first champions winner try and fight for their title again. And that would be very unfortunate. So I would hope he just stays with Ascend for the potential of having an era, building the legacy with that team. And it would also be disappointing just in that it seemed like those 5 individual players put in so much work in the fourth quarter of this year to be able to win that tournament, to be able to win champions rather, by playing so many other small tournaments. It seemed like they were grinding really hard. It would just be cool to see them stick together. From what they've accomplished here at the end of the year. So I would hope he just stays with Ascend. But also, a whole lot of people, writing blank checks. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, well, and I've heard all types of rumors.
Oh.
All types. He could be going to NA. He could be staying in EU. He could be going to global esports. He could be, he's going everywhere. Everyone's trying to get cNed.
Yeah. I think it'd be interesting to see. First of all, I think it's very cool that he's just exploring his options, because it's going to drive up the price for his renegotiation back with Ascend anyway. So I think it's just a smart thing for him to do, even if he's intending on staying with the rest of the team. I mean, I'm sure the others renegotiated their price to be higher after just winning champions anyway. But cNed has that quality where he is one of those players that's self-sufficient enough that you could export him to, or rather import him to your team if you're in North America, or bring him into G2 or whatever, and you could expect to see similar levels of performance to him. He's not tied to how his team necessarily always sets him up or playing off that kind of thing. He's a Jett. Jets can do whatever the hell they want in the game. It's always been like that, actually.
Yeah.
I think it would be sick to see him go to like 100 Thieves or a G2 or something like that. If you had a blockbuster move that was somewhat similar to like a TenZ level kind of thing, so that we could see where the game is headed in terms of importing or headed in terms of buyouts. Not that you would have a buyout in this instance, presumably because he's just finished his contract with Ascend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I hope I really hope he stays, because that would suck. But I'm very happy, just like Josh said, about exploring options. I think there's so many teams that would obviously love to have cNed. I think he's probably any team, if they can make the move, would want to make the move and drop whoever, like an Ethan situation for Dicey type of stuff. So where should he go though? If it wasn't Ascend, for example, I would want him to stay in Europe as well. I don't think we're ready in NA to start saying, okay, cool, let's just start importing players. And I don't necessarily trust that would work. I've seen it so many times, and the only one that I was really, really happy with was Optic back in CS. I think communication in this game is the most important thing still to this day. And if you have a language barrier and it's not even like perfect, NA teams are used to perfect NA type of stuff where people have played in that region for a long time. I'm not confident that would work at all.
Interestingly, Ascend are the first team to win a major tournament in Valorant or CS where they speak different languages. It's a fully international roster. This roster had, what was it, a Ukrainian Spanish guy, two Polish players, a Turkish player, and a Finnish player. I mean, you can't really get much more varied within the continent of Europe than that. And they were still able to find success. So I think at some point here, North America is just going to have to bite the bullet and realize that it's possible to be able to find success. I mean,
it's possible, but not probable based on all the rest of the history.
Sure, but it doesn't appear to have affected Ascend too badly because it's not like this was a one-off tournament. They've won previous things before and been at the top of the scene for a significant period of time. So I don't think you could be too worried about that. The thing that I wanted to pose as well is, if you're 100 Thieves right now, you're signing the checks for 100 Thieves or G2 or something like that, and you've got this star player currently sat on the throne of Valorant. They've just won champions, but also there's this like sword of Damocles hanging above them, which is cNed potentially getting punished for the Turkish money laundering thing, right? If you end up trying to sign a huge deal for cNed and then he gets banned for 3 months or something and your star player isn't available for the first tournament cycle, that would be pretty horrendous. And as far as we can tell, we have no idea what the ruling on that would end up being.
I think as well, looking at the bigger picture in Valorant right now, moving into 2022, teams should, instead of prioritizing their budget and their money towards big, heavy-hitting star players, like it worked out in a case of Sentinels picking up TenZ, for example, but I think the game has adjusted and moved on, that now structure, planning is key, and also rock-solid support players are often the backbone of what makes a really good squad. Like, you can have a star player and it will help you get far, but the difference maker that a lot of teams lack is what I mentioned before, the planning, the structure, the backbone, support players, people who can play a multitude of roles, the IGLs, for example, as well. And that's the thing that a lot of these teams are not blind to, but it's more important, I would say, than a cracked out Jett player, as good as cNed is. I think, that prioritization of where their money should go should be placed elsewhere. And for cNed,
the Jets. Sorry, I was just going to say the Jett players on the top 4 teams from both our rankings and champions are arguably like not the best players on their team in terms of how they performed at champions.
Yeah, and that's we have evidence for it, right? You think of, I guess, Defo. You think of.
I mean, cNed at champions overperformed by Zeke. You've got Nags overperformed by cNed. Scream, arguably, I mean, maybe not in this tournament itself. Scream probably was their best player, but historically, you could put like a Yampi ahead of him or something like that in terms of overall impact on the team.
Yeah, I agree with all of you guys, though, in terms of narratives. I'm a narrative Nelly. I like to see the team stay together. I want to see them win more and carry forwards that narrative, because I think it's for the betterment of the scene as well. If you have the champions former champions going up against all these other teams in EMEA, I think that's a really cool narrative to carry forwards into 2022. It's probably the better outcome. Although you could argue as well that like there would be a tremendous amount of hype if cNed did go to a North American squad, like 100 Thieves. People would be chomping at the bit to try and watch that team perform as well with cNed on it.
Yeah, and being like the most prominent inter-regional in NA at least. I have one last question on this topic. What happens to Ascend if cNed goes? Is this team dead, or is this team still a team that can contend for a top 4?
I think they contend. I think that this tournament, to me, showcased that they don't need cNed to be the best player in the world in order to win. He was still insanely good, but he wasn't the reason they won. Their overall form, their role swaps, their map planning, and Zeke popping off was what won them the tournament, in my opinion. But cNed is still a fantastic player. But I think if cNed left this team, they'd be able to find a quality player across the rest of EMEA to be able to fill that role, and they would still be a top 4 team worldwide, I think.
I agree. And honestly, I think we might have felt differently just a couple months ago. When you look back at like some of the online performances, like in Red Bull against Gambit, where cNed just dropped like whatever, damn near 40 on split alone to win that game, versus then watching them at this tournament where the output from their supports and just Ela's Bone Cold and Starzo each had so many pivotal moments, but such a high level of consistency throughout the tournament. They were really just looking like such a well-rounded team. So yeah, I mean, now I would certainly have more faith in Ascend being able to contend within a top 4 spot in EU, just finding a different top Jett player to slot in. Yeah, I mean, it does also seem though that, I mean, if Ascend didn't win, I don't think this team would have been around. I mean, if the contracts were just over, I don't think this team would.
They would have been one of the teams.
They would have gotten
essentially going into the
vultures would have come for them.
Not even that, just the whirlpool of roster changes. Like vultures is one word, but like there's only so many teams throwing out money and poaching. G2 being one of them in EMEA. But yeah, they probably would have just got tossed into the blender, and the players would have ended up in different areas and whatnot. Yeah. I want to move this topic along to talking about the elephant in the room regarding cNed, which is talking about the fact that he was involved in this Turkish money laundering scandal, and the idea of essentially the punishment has been delayed, if there will be a punishment. And the question being here, with the topic that we have written up, should cNed have been punished before Champs? It meant that, listen, if cNed ended up being punished before Champs, probably wouldn't have been able to play in Champs, and we would not be currently looking at the World Champions.
Yeah, I mean, even though we just said that cNed was not the reason they won, they wouldn't have won had they had to get a replacement at short notice beforehand. They would need time in order to be able to get back to that kind of level, and they'd probably have a downgrade no matter what, because cNed's a freak. He's incredibly good. So I'm waiting to kind of see, because I think this is a bit of a taster. You know, I mean, is this E6 report ever going to even drop? Who the hell knows? But there are going to be in the future times where Valorant is tested in terms of players cheating, getting involved in immoral stuff outside of the scene, match fixing, these kind of things, some of which are going to have direct impact upon matches, like the match fixing stuff, some of which might be match fixing in the past, or like this instance. And I think Valorant and Riot have a tough task ahead of them in terms of dealing with these in ways which set adequate precedents. And so far, I mean, what they did at Champions in terms of dealing with what they considered to be exploits was atrocious. I mean, it was awful how they handled it, both in terms of having that like 30-40 minute pause, whatever it was, just for checking if Jets were allowed to jump onto the Haven C box, and then not doing anything when there was a cam exploit afterwards. They haven't made any move towards cNed here. They haven't made any investigation or any move based on match fixing in the past towards CS. It's it does just look, you know, I see whenever these match fixing things come out and there's like CS fans, they're always in the comments going like, yeah, just tell them to fuck off to Valorant. It's a free city for cheaters over there. You know, that's the kind of reputation that your game builds up if you don't deal with this kind of stuff early.
Yeah. I think, well, it seems like the precedent they're taking is waiting for essentially the external investigation, whether that might come from the Twitch Turkey or the SIC report, to eventually, you know, actually put down the ban hammer or suspensions or whatever that might take the form of. Could it backfire, them waiting around like this? I mean, potentially. Like, you might run into situations where something similar crops up, but because of the circumstances where it affects different players who aren't about to perform in the biggest tournament of the year, the biggest issue is the inconsistency in terms of punishments that's been dished out in the past with decision making. And this is, like, as far as I'm aware, is the first time something like with the Twitch money laundering scandal has happened in the Valorant scene, where they've had to, you know, decide, do they want to wait? Do they want to take punishment right now and take matters into their own hands? And they've waited, but what happens in the future if something else happens? Like, do they just decide to then take punishment before waiting for an external thing? Like, I don't know. It adds weird questions, because right now they're saying, we're going to leave it until there's something else done by whatever, external parties, right? Until there's more.
I think they specifically said they wanted more info from Twitch, but I don't know whether they're actively pursuing that. It all just seems to have quietly disappeared.
Yeah.
It's weird to me, because I thought that they did set a good precedent with Sinatra way back at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not sure that was a good precedent. Banning him for 6 months and then
an okay precedent. Let's just say they actually took action. Is the point?
Yeah.
Whether we agree with what the action was, and he's not in the scene right now, right? So at least it was enough to do that. Where they were swift with that. Sure, that's a morally different situation, of course, but at the same time, this is still a situation that you would expect them to at least address a little bit. That's why I'm confused, because it feels like they're selecting now. You know, like, oh shit, this could affect the, like, I don't know what the decision is or what they're balancing or whatever, but it definitely feels like they're selecting, okay, this would be bad for us, for our game, which I don't think is okay. You know, I think that actually scares me for the future of even decisions like what they made at Champions with the camera exploit and stuff like that. That scares me really hard, because it's like, oh, well, this might be the best team. Like, oh shit, like,
yeah, in terms of leeway being shown to certain teams, because you're thinking about the wider picture of the game. I think a lot of it does. Rather than pinning this down to malicious intent, it's much easier to pin this down to the fact that Riot is made of multiple different departments over multiple countries, and each have their own level of authority in terms of how they want to deal with issues within those regions. Because, yeah, that's what I'm kind of pinning that inconsistency down. I'm hoping that it just gets fixed with time, but hoping's one thing, and it actually happening is another.
Yeah, I think they set themselves up for being in a horrendous situation had cNed not been punished by Riot, and then, say, Twitch came out with some information right before Champions. I mean, they've just set themselves up for a catastrophic situation there. And they didn't, I mean, there was no communication that they were going to do their own investigation into things. They just said, we're going to wait for more information to be given to us by Twitch. They're not trying to investigate themselves. There was no public discourse about that, and the only public discourse that came from anybody that's involved above cNed was just a send making excuses for him.
Yeah,
so that's, you know, your first your first world championship team has a player that was involved in illegal activities about 2 months beforehand. It's not a good look for the game, I think, and it's just been quietly brushed under the rug from what I can see, which I think is a little too fortunate.
Here's the other thing, though. Like, the way that the circuit is, it makes it really hard to punish people that with scales that actually make sense, right? Missing champions in my mind, based off of what I know about the situations, probably is too harsh. Even though that's the only answer that I could see, you know, it's like the only answer is that he has to miss champions. That's a problem with the way that the circuit is. So it's hard to end up choosing that sort of punishment. Not that it shouldn't be chosen, but just that is there, you know?
And on the other hand of it, had it happened to, let's say Sentinels, right? Had it happened to a player from Sentinels coming straight out of Berlin, if you ban them for 2 months, they're not playing in any tournaments anyway, so it doesn't affect them at all. So yeah, I mean, if you do it based on time, it really does just have either zero or insane effects depending on what time of the year it is.
I mean, I think the only other one that I can think of for reference was Zelsis got banned for the 1 qualifier. He couldn't play in stage 1 qualifier, and then version 1 had to play with the sub, and then he could play in the 2nd qualifier for what was it for Masters for the Berlin qualifier.
Masters 3, yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think you guys raised some good points, and I also agree with the sentiment of just a bit of worry for the future in regards to the rulings being so wishy-washy at the moment. Yeah. Especially when it compounds with the chaotic events at Champions surrounding rulings as well. So I think that it's reasonable to be a bit worried, and hopefully in the future this is just something that would be more streamlined.
I certainly feel like it seems at the moment that Valorant aren't taking the lessons of Counter-Strike under their wings. Counter-Strike is riddled with problems like this. And the more you develop the circuit down and the more leagues you add and stuff like that, where there's the potential for those games to be broadcast to a lot of people and then people maybe bet on them and that kind of stuff, you want to have really good structure in place from the beginning to ensure that people aren't incentivized to participate in that or are punished appropriately for it, because you know it's going to happen. You just know it. You don't live in a fairy tale land where you think match fixing isn't going to occur at the amateur and tier 2 scene in Valorant. It's the same system, the same structure. Why would it not? Possibly the only reason would be because you can't trade skins.
Yeah, I mean, I remember at the beginning of the kind of esports circuit of Valorant back in 2020, we were having similar discussions about players that were involved, and also some leaked stuff that came out about various players, leaked voice messages between people talking about it back then. And there was investigations done, and it was found that there was no wrongdoing overall, but yeah, overall, just more consistency, I think, in decision making moving forwards would be greatly appreciated. Let's move on. Let's talk about a different topic. We're running out of time as well, because we're already approaching, I think, probably now, what are you on, like 2-hour mark of the show, and we still have a lot to talk about in terms of some of these.
We can blast through these roster moves.
Yeah, some of these roster moves and whatnot. But the starting topic here is that North America is looking to import more talent. We've briefly been mentioning it over the course of the episode, but it is official. Like, people are talking about the whispers and rumors within the woods.
No, there's one too. Like Rhyme signed to Gen.G today.
Yeah.
So
that got announced. And honestly, that's a pretty good move from Gen.G. I think Rhyme was low-key nasty on NIP, and NIP were just in some strange situation. I mean, as far as I remember, because I feel like it's been years since I've even seen NIP play. But when you were able to watch them, I always thought Rhyme was a really standout player. It's just that NIP as a team, whether it be from the organization not having a lot of structure for them or something within the team, I don't know what was going on, but I think that whoever on Gen.G decided to go for this move, I think that's pretty smart.
Yep. He's a pretty good player, pretty underrated as well.
He's versatile.
Yes, extremely flexible.
Which I think is good for a team like Gen.G. When they are, in my mind, I think of Gen.G as one of the teams that love to go into games with mountains of prep work, ideas, concepts that they want to run on maps against certain teams. And yeah, they can be a bit more, they can be almost too methodical when it comes to their approach to the game sometimes. I feel like the overall identity of Gen.G, but it's always good to have somebody who can play a multitude of roles coming in, because it just gives you more options.
Yeah. I mean, their roster looks pretty cool right now. It'll be interesting to see where they go next year. I also think if and I know this is one of those things where it's like, guys, when's the Jett nerf coming? Jett nerfs, but I think they are one of the teams as well where like they don't really have a star Jett or like a dedicated Jett player, but they have a bunch of sick players that can play everything else. So like if there's a meta, just pausers the meta with no Jett, and they're just ready to go.
Yeah. What I'd like to talk about with this topic, more so than the acquisitions that are being made, is talking about what this means for the wider ecosystem of North America, though, as well. Because if they're already starting to import players into the scene, it feels like, okay, well, North America had a great start in terms of the VCT circuit, had a terrible showing at Champs in terms of the overall success of the North American teams compared to where we thought they were at. And it looks like they're immediately looking towards EMEA to import talent. Do we think that this is a response to this, where they're now looking over towards essentially the region that's seen more success and looking to get the talent over because they don't have faith in their own scene? Or is it a multitude of other reasons? For example, could it be that the buyouts of North American players might be too high and currently it's too inflated and EMEA just seems like a cheaper alternative?
Yep. I think both are true. I mean, I think that there are tons of great free agents around the world that you can sign, but also there are tier 3 NA teams that have academy teams. Fucking everybody's getting signed. Everyone is under contract. Everyone is getting like the amount of academy teams for teams that are not in even like tier 2 is actually it's pretty wild. Players are just orgs are just trying to sign as many fucking players as possible, and they're trying to make money off them. And yeah, I mean, if you could save money by importing players that are talented from around the world, why not? You know?
I mean, it's almost the only choice in some circumstances, right? Like,
I mean, yeah,
because you need a specific piece, and the tier 2 scene is locked up in insane buyouts. I mean, I've heard that from a lot of different places now. That sometimes that might be the only choice. To me, it sucks because in my mind, there is NA talent good enough to be able to take some of those spots. I think there's a combination of we're not seeing them enough, so orgs are not. Well, I don't know. I feel like they're scouting better than I would, but I'm still for some reason seeing like players that I'm like, holy shit, like he should be on a good team, you know? Or there's the buyout situation.
I think we're gonna potentially approach a really shit situation though in the series in VCT next year, where there are a lot of nasty good tier 2 NA players who deserve chances that are on academy teams that, depending on the rules, can't play in VCT tournaments because their main team isn't playing. And in some cases, like I was saying, some of the main teams are like tier 3, and they have an academy team that's better than them, like, or at least like near the same skill level, could outperform them. Like that has occurred.
Tier 3 though, that's unfair to them.
What? Wait, what?
Sorry, I'm just making a cheap joke at the expense of
tier 3.
I did. I mean, just yeah.
Joke. I'm sure the new TSM roster's actually.
But
good.
Also, the TSM Academy team has really good players, and if the rules are going to be that they can't play in VCT, there's going to be a bunch of good NA teams that just can't play, and the players are just
surely the players did not sign contracts that would keep them into VCT, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, for sure.
Where they can't play.
No.
The
orgs would like to pay them for only a couple months and then let them do what they want for VCT.
I mean, if you think about things from the organization's owner's point of view as well, it makes sense to try and snap up upcoming talent because the buyout prices are crazy and people are paying them, some of them as well. They're like, low 6 figures or the top end if you have a star player. If you're the next Unbox and you manage to sign Yay and you get a buyout figure for him it's just like a tenth of what TenZ's cost, then you're raking in money to be able to sustain the entire rest of your organization. So
I mean,
it's eventually the market though should trend towards people paying those buyouts. If all of the talent was locked up, you'd be forced to. And if you don't want to import talent from EU or from Korea or from wherever you would want to import it from, LATAM, whatever, then you're going to have to pay those buyouts if you want that caliber of players. That's just the cost that's attached to it. That's kind of that to me seems to be the way that things are going.
Yeah, I was trying to find one that I don't know. Trying to find something that I just saw earlier. I mean, I just saw that like B-Dog had gotten signed.
LG from TSM Academy.
Yes. Yeah, and then I think it just got announced that XSET. Actually, I don't know if it's officially announced, but there's some article that got posted about XSET getting cryo cells. Who's on SOAR? Who's just tearing up teams in like tier 2 NA tournaments to be their new star duelist player. But
I really think though that the narrative should not be that North America has given up faith in the domestic talent. I don't think that should be the narrative, even coming out of Champions where the NA teams didn't do well. I think the talent is all there in North America.
Yeah,
you're not getting. If Eccles joins 100 Thieves, Eccles is not a better player by virtue of being an EMEA player than their former IGLs of Steel and Nitro. It's not an automatic upgrade just because you come from EMEA and they've been winning. These players, Rhyme, Eccles, these kind of people, they're so highly sought after because their team just dissolved. NIP just let them go the contracts. They've got no buyouts. They're good players for mega cheap, and they don't have the same level of salaries, and they have no buyout. So the players want to go there because it's a bigger salary, and the teams want to sign them because there's no buyout. So it just works for everybody. But it doesn't mean that they're better than the North American talent.
Yeah, I genuinely think that there's just a problem that has been created by the value of NA players starting and skyrocketing so early, right? This is what we were talking about way back when we were all discussing the TenZ buyout and stuff like that. Now it is straight up like a bubble where they have to be doing this sort of playing the system with the academy teams and signing of players, and like, for example, 100 Thieves with 7, right? Like those sorts of moves are consistently needing to happen in order to keep the business actually reasonable to run.
Yeah.
And that is bad though. So it's not, I agree with you. I don't think it should be losing faith in the NA players.
Yeah.
But what they've done is created a situation where those NA players are not going to get a shot. And the only way we're going to see new talent and new blood come through is by actual like free agent teams and tier 2 teams signing those free agent teams.
Yeah.
It's my overall take on this as well is like not even looking at North America, but I like imports when it raises the skill level of the entire region. Like I was posting a tweet about Piff moving over to the what team was it? The
SCA Bleed Esports.
Yeah, like the I think there was a Singaporean team.
Yeah.
And those are really cool imports in my opinion, because he obviously has a wealth of experience that he can bring over to the team that can elevate that whole team, and as a side effect of that will elevate the whole region as well. I mean, it was a cool move, I thought, in the grand scheme of things, because it means you're going to get more of a bit of a global esport. And there's obviously limitations in effect of VCT where teams need to have a certain amount of members from the regions of which they're competing in, right? I believe it's like limited.
3 out of 5.
You're limited to 3 out of 5 that you need. So you can't just have an entire roster imported into the other regions. But yeah, moves like this are pretty interesting overall. We can move on to some of the other transitions that are happening as well. Some of the other acquisitions or releases as well. This one's quite sad with Giants releasing Davidp and Ambi. Poor Davidp, man. This guy just, the whole team picked apart essentially by G2, screwed again essentially when the team was seeing a lot of success, and you're left in this awkward situation now where, I mean, both of them getting released now. Do Giants even have anybody on the roster?
Yeah, Fatinho. Fatinho is still on the roster. I imagine that the team is probably going to try and create a full Spanish roster or something. I mean, the Spanish scene, if they're going to have like Spanish leagues or something, I don't know. Fatinho to me seemed like their most sellable player to G2 because Spanish organizations love Spanish players. They love them. They tap into the fan base. It's just great marketing to have a great Spanish player. And that's what Fatinho is. He's a great Spanish player. But the team just went in a completely different direction where they I mean, clearly that wasn't what G2 were looking for. Mixwell presumably wants to continue with Jett, and now they're left with this one piece. I mean, he was a nasty good player, so if they want to build a good team around him, they probably could. I would imagine they're either looking to build a full Spanish team or keeping him on the roster to keep his buyout. Because you can't release him as a free agent and still have the buyout, right? If they wanna like sell him to Guild or something, then they'll have to keep him under the team and then trade him rather than releasing him.
Yeah, I think looking at where players like Davidp might go as well, Davidp, just alternate between them. That's a player. I mean, he was doing a lot of the IGLing, right, for Giants in terms of for that team as well, and pushing forwards a lot of the success of that roster. That is a very attractive player to have if you're thinking about importing into North America, where I think that kind of structure and experience that comes with him would be incredibly valuable in North America, I think, right now. And I don't really know what teams would really be searching for that at the moment, if off the top of my head. You're thinking out loud.
I mean, it's 100 Thieves, really, isn't it? Like, in terms of IGL players and being able to pick up a Smokes player so that Ethan wouldn't have to play that role and could play more of the flex role for them. I think that's the most natural fit. If they're going with Eccles, then yeah, fine. But if they knew that, and if their hand isn't forced by earlier decision making, then they should definitely be trying out Davidp. I think the guy's sure he's got a bit more of a one-dimensional play style, but it's still been working, and he's been adapting it to stay ahead of the competition. And he's been screwed over so much by Europe that you might as well send him to North America and see what his luck's like over there.
Vengeance.
Yeah. Champions 2022. 100 Thieves versus G2 in the finals.
Yep. What a mashup.
Right. Yeah. There's also, I mean, there's some breaking news as well that's been reported.
Breaking news.
What's the breaking
which
news?
is
headline to breaking.
I mean, it's not particularly importing stuff, but it's part of this whole Brazilian swirl, which I'm sure we'll address at some point in later videos. But Sassy and
announced.
Yeah, Sassy and Sadhak being signed to Loud, along with Ona, the coach of Crew, and then Aspas is supposedly linked to this roster as well, with Pancada and Les as well, who are like ex-Stars Horizons players and have been pretty decent. So that looks like a tasty, tasty little roster.
Yeah, I mean, I'm most excited about the coach of Crew, I think, getting signed to a team, because it's clear that with enough time, you give the guy a good enough team around him as well. If you give him resources, I think he will deliver you results. And
he's working with an IGL that speaks Spanish as well. So that's just, I mean, that's perfect, right?
Yeah.
Like, you've got your IGL and your coach working together. If Ona was going anywhere in Brazil, it should have been with Sadhak. And it is.
Yeah. Sense.
Yeah, I like it. It's hard to define how successful we appear. I mean, what we're expecting from a lot of these teams, I think, because we just don't know how the rest of the teams are going to shake up. Don't know what the region's going to look like in 2 months' time. But that's when we'll have a better idea, I suppose, in 2 months' time. But yeah. Moving on quickly. Fnatic, looking to trade Doma. We talked about this briefly, right, on the previous episode when we were going over the recaps themselves as well. But Doma, I've always felt was, I mean, I wouldn't say he had an overperformance at the LAN, but definitely fulfilled the key role for their team in the amount of roles that he was able to play.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's got the flexibility. That's always been an advantage of Doma. But I don't think his Champions performance was awful by any means, but he's no longer the star or even like the next important player, I think, for them in their recent online performance and what they showed at Champions as well. He's moved into a really supportive role for this team. I don't know whether he wants to continue with that, but it seems like the team is looking for different options, maybe more firing power at the front. I'm not exactly sure, but they've been relying on Doma for a long time to fill the holes in this team, basically. Started obviously being the star duelist player, honestly, and then slowly took more and more steps backwards to the point where he was playing KO quite a bit, and literally is like all the way at the back throwing these left click flashes for people rather than being that secondary punch for the team. So he's I think this is just good for both parties, to be honest. Fnatic clearly looking to shake something up internally, and Doma's still a good player. He can offer a lot to a lot of other teams too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I said this last time, but Fnatic is one of those teams that I really, really trust in terms of their moves that they've made so far. Like, if there's a problem, they're addressing that problem with specific moves if they need to, you know? So whether or not Doma's a good player for them, I believe that in the background, there's a reason why they need somebody else in Doma's position, whether that's firepower or not. I'm willing to bet that it's more they need somebody who is more proactive on their own and able to contribute in ways that are part of the creative strats that they are coming up with in practice, but also on the fly adaptation where he's, you know, leading a new tactic down a different way that they didn't have to address until that round actually played out. That's my guess, but again, very confident, even though I really like Doma.
Yeah, I agree with your sentiment there. It definitely might be the best thing for both parties. I think Fnatic, to take it to the next level, probably needed to make a move. So, you know, not mad at it, but hopefully Doma gets another team. He just went bald. Someone's got to sign him. He committed all of his hair for that one final outing. Someone's got to sign him.
Yeah, God bless him. I mean, as soon as he did it, Durka popped up in our co-stream and just said, Doma went bald and immediately ran it down in 5 of the first 5 rounds he played in the scrim block. The bald buff is not real. Durka does not believe in the bald buff. I don't think that's exactly what got him cut, but, you know, maybe it was a contributing factor. I'm not sure.
Yeah, just didn't get along with the bald buff.
Yeah.
I will
but
say.
But also, Balla, you said that you trust Fnatic to make moves. Did you see that they lost Anders as well?
I did.
I mean, presumably that was... Hey, listen, if I'm reading between the lines, that's Anders being like, hey, listen, my strats worked insanely well at Champions. That's why we got as far as we did. Pay me the big bucks. And they said, fuck off. That's what I would imagine happened there.
Yeah, I have to think that that's the case. And that's what Anders basically said. They couldn't come to an agreement, right? So, I mean, he didn't specifically say the details, but to me, that is unfortunate because, well, that's the situation where I think it's the wrong choice, but it has nothing to do necessarily with like the actual in-game stuff. It's just that they couldn't come to an agreement and they are being forced in a direction, right? Instead of let's make a decision on Doma, and I don't know. You see where I'm saying? Basically, it's just
you're saying they didn't cut him. They didn't think he was shit. They just didn't have the money, presumably, or like a head coach position or whatever. Maybe he was gunning for Minnie's job. Came at him with a knife in the night.
I think as the sun is setting outside in the windows and Josh is whispering to not wake his family, the energy is being sucked out of this podcast. And I find myself just subconsciously whispering as well now as I'm delivering the next topic lines, which is TenZ buyout overpriced in hindsight? Wow. Who knows? I mean, I do want to inject some more energy into this podcast because I am literally like
soft.
I can feel myself slowly falling asleep as Josh delivers his ASMR. The TenZ buyout situation. I've already delivered my thought process on this one, which was around the time of Reykjavik, there was a precedent set where StarJet players could carry you, and
Bren, fire off a fucking hot take.
Dude, okay, well, it's not even a hot take. It's a take. It's literally an opinion I said earlier, but the game was at a point where it wasn't as developed as much in terms of the strategy behind it, the planning. There's layers upon layers that have been developed since then. We were at a point where StarJet players could take over a match. And honestly, it wasn't even that long ago. Like, we've seen it plenty of times. But I think Champs was the greatest showcase that you don't need your StarJet players to really just take over a game in order to be the best team in the world. Like, we saw this from Ascend. We saw this from Scream as well on Liquid. All the typical names that jump out of my head. Defo as well. And this move that was made early on, obviously a ton of hype behind it coming through. I mean, an incredible amount of money that was asked, apparently, with a rumor being 1.25 million. And I believe they lowered it to 1 million, which was the agreed price. $1 million buyout. I think.
Well, they originally wanted 2, and they lowered it to 1 million with a 250 grand loan period on top. So, like, the actual buyout is, I guess, $1 million, and then the 250 grand was to loan him for some time extra as well.
Yeah, this was a classic case of.
Which, by the way, is why you shouldn't lease cars, because imagine if they leased TenZ the entire time. They'd have had to pay like 5 million. So listen, if you want some financial advice, try and buy things, and especially buy things secondhand when their values absolutely
the second-hand car market is shot up in price over COVID.
Still cheaper than buying new cars, surely.
I don't know. I haven't looked into it, but I do know that the price of used
cars. People will buy them and sell them immediately, and then
you get money back over. Yeah, okay, well, sure, okay, new cars maybe, but anyway, this was a case of in the moment. I think a bit of like the people with the money making decisions based off of hype, based off of the new fucking drop ship merch that's coming out.
I mean,
and it was
the new stock.
Yeah, the new stock that's coming out.
Did they not get? The question is, did they get enough clout for that million? Did the million get $1 million in clout?
Yeah, how do you even equate it to numbers? But the thing is, TenZ is
what's the
one of the
most per dollar rate?
He's still one of the most popular players in the world. He essentially did win them Reykjavik with a huge portion of his.
He got more popular as well.
Yeah, he got more popular off the back of that. They have signed. Literally, I think one of, if not the most popular player in the world. They still have him. I think it's hard to put that kind of comparison on, but definitely in the moment, the amount of hype that was just being driven off the back of it, because TenZ was just performing so well, just dragging Cloud9. And yeah, with the power of hindsight, I think so. It was a bit of an overpriced. I think this kind of inflation that's occurring in North America when it comes to buyouts and the overall buyouts and salaries is not a good thing. Because it just makes it more difficult to achieve sustainability down the road for the esport.
Yeah, I mean, systemically, sure, but like, I don't think Sentinels cares about that point, right? Yeah. Like, I don't think it was overpriced at all when you look at literally the fact that Sentinels is the most watched team out of any team in every single tournament that they play. Like, they drive Valorant viewership to an extent. And without the TenZ buyout, that wouldn't have happened. So you can instantly, in my mind, I think they probably even made money off of this deal just by like merch and stuff alone and brand deals alone.
Possibly, yeah.
You get more numbers to be able to sell sponsors against it. If they sold an extra $1 million in terms of sponsorship deals against Sentinels by all of the increased viewership they've got for their team in VCT and their YouTube videos that TenZ has been in and making. Yeah, probably. Yeah. The thing with TenZ is that this buyout was not just for a player, it's for a player who is a content creator. That's not the same if we were, you could try and answer the question, what would cNed get the same price if he was currently under Ascend? If he was locked in with Ascend and then he went to 100 Thieves, would he get the same price? No, because the guy doesn't make insane content on the side where he's also bringing you eyeballs on your products constantly. So it's hard to say, but I definitely don't think it should be used as a measuring stick for other players who are not content creators. If you're Ascend and you were, I'm using Ascend in this example, but obviously it doesn't actually apply, but just as a thought experiment, if you were Ascend and you were basing it off, well, they got $1 million for TenZ, we'll ask for $1 million for cNed. It just, the logic doesn't make sense.
It's better. Like,
yeah, exactly.
No.
Yeah. The numbers don't really match up too well. I want to transition this topic as well, just so we can wrap this at a nice time. I've got a nice little dinner to get to. I actually have to cook a bunch of roast potatoes and parsnips as well. I've got to get on with that. I'm running out of time in the day.
Regular Christmas dinner.
The daylight's gone. Yeah, I got to start cooking stuff as well. But
that's a juicy last little topic.
Yeah, we can.
Oh,
well. Wait. I do want to end it on this one final one, which is shifting it into the general Sentinels topic, which is...
It's too juicy a topic.
It's too juicy to not let up.
We got to bite into that.
Should Sentinels make roster changes? This is the big question. It's the big narrative. Everybody's talking about this right now as well, coming off the back of it, because obviously Sentinels, they didn't have the performance that they were looking for, and a lot of people are saying, yeah, they should be making a lot of roster changes. People pointing at TenZ as an individual. Don't think that's too correct. But... for me, I'll set it up like this. I don't think it's necessarily... well, it is a player issue in terms of things, but it feels like, to me, more so there's something about the identity and the culture within the team where it is very much like Sentinels see success because they're friends with one another. They can deliver criticism without worrying about it being taken personally. They can improve really rapidly. They can adapt on the fly. They get along. The chemistry is there. But because of that, they took a very long time in terms of finding a coach. And even when they did find a coach in the form of Raucus, I felt like it didn't really help them that much. It didn't elevate them like the same way it elevates a team like Fnatic when they get new pieces, like Liquid with their coaching staff, like Crew, for example, and their run that they made as well, off the back of the preparation that a coach helps the IGL make. Shaz has a lot on his plate, but that's where the issues for Sentinels lies for me, which could be resolved with roster changes, but I don't know what you guys are thinking off the back of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. It might not have... I mean, yeah, Raucus also presumably came in pretty close, kind of close to Champions actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
So probably hard even from his perspective to try and integrate yourself into the team and then make positive change as a coach in such a short period of time too.
Yeah.
So that might be a situation where, you know, maybe he'll be able to add more value over time if he stays with the team coaching, if they bring in an analyst as well to work with him, something along those lines, right? I don't think they need to make a roster move now, but it seems like an inevitability sometime within next year that it will happen. Or rather have to.
Sure. Yeah, I think that that's going to be the case for a lot of different teams, but at the moment, I don't think there's an argument to require it. To me, I think the easy change is to try and cut somebody from your roster, get an improvement, improve your individuals. I don't know. I don't think that that's the mentality of the team, but when fans look at it, they're like, okay, well, Zom's bottom fragger, get him out, get somebody who's like Marv, who is a playmaker as well, and your team will improve. But to me, when I watch Sentinels play, it's not their individuals that are losing them games. It's the way in which they play. It's the game plan that they bring to the table.
Yeah.
And it's not that the game plan is bad. It's just that other teams at Champions had sick plans. Like for these crucial rounds that are real swingy, decider, either economy changing or mostly economy changing. So I'm talking like bonus rounds where you can eco your opponents, rounds where you're about to be ecoed, these kind of things. Teams will come out with really creative stuff and try and shift the tempo against their opponents.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem to be something that Sentinels are really going for. And I don't think that's something you adjust with roster changes. You don't bring in another player to bring ideas to the team. You don't even necessarily have to bring in a coach. It's just you need to recognize where the game is headed. Like the flow of the game to me is heading in a direction where you need some set stuff to knock your opponents off guard every now and then you can have this loose play style the rest of the time. But you need little ways of being able to get up over your opponents, and other teams are doing it better here than Sentinels were. Crew were doing it better. Liquid had their own ways of adapting the meta better than Sentinels did. X10 had their little set play stuff. Gambit have tons of them on defense where it's simple stuff, but they're always playing off each other. Like every setup has a couple of layers to why they're opting for this setup. You know, if Defo's opping down bind short, that has carry-on effects to what everybody else is doing to ensure that they all get really good value out of that. Whereas with a team like Sentinels, somebody opts short, and that's the end of that game plan. That's one player making the adjustment. It's not the team making the full adjustment, and it's like everything that some of these teams do feels set, even though it's not, because you've just got so many different mini things that you can add onto each other. For Sentinels, it still feels very, very loose, and that I think is where they're losing their edge.
I agree with that. I think my only reservation in all of this, and this is based off of what happened at Champions, is Zom specifically, and the way that he, and I said this last episode, the way that he incited the Brazilian region on Twitter when he is in a position where his team is facing elimination, right? They're facing going out in groups and champions. They're in the middle of the most important tournament of the year, and Sentinels and the org, obviously they've prioritized that sort of stuff before, which is banter and whatnot. But I think for me as a player, if I was on that team, I'd be feeling a little, I don't know if the word is betrayed, because I know that Zoms is that type of guy, right? But I'd be feeling like you need to focus. You need to focus on what's actually at hand rather than worrying about.
I mean, I get what you're saying. It's like, I understand what you're saying, Paula, and I think that what an actual sort of physical example of what you're talking about were the post-game interviews that Josh did with Shazam and Zoms. There's a clear difference in how both of them feel about what has occurred. Where I can understand the point you're trying to get to, where Shazam is like just giving it his all, had a sick individual performance, on the verge of tears, and then Tom's like, I don't give a fuck, I'm still getting paid, or whatever he said to you, Josh. Like, and that's not to say that he isn't trying or giving it his all or anything, but
100%.
I mention that simply to give like a sort of illustration to the point that you're trying to make.
And Sentinels, Shazam, and everybody could just be fucking fine with it. And I'm just speaking out of my ass, like, and I probably am, right? Because they know who Zoms is, and we know who Zoms is. However, I still feel like if there was any change to be happening, it would be because of things like that, things that we have no clue about, not because of performance, right? If there was anything to happen, it would be what Josh is talking about, where they're actually addressing those other issues and structure on top of the team, right? More coaching, more staff, all of that stuff. I think they have to admit to themselves that they need all of that. They can't just be that team who is playing at home and like, those teams are spending so much money. Look at us, we're fucking on them. Like, they can't be that anymore. That can't happen for them.
Yeah, I think I'd be interested to hear their take when it comes to practice time as well. It's not a question that I asked when they got eliminated, although I probably should have done at the time, especially towards somebody like Zoms, who'll talk his shit if he thinks you're wrong. But it is a pretty powerful narrative within the community at the moment that, like, oh, Sentinels never practices, that's why they lost. And other teams say it about Sentinels as well. It's not just Redditors talking out their ass, like other teams and other coaches will tell you, these guys don't practice. Like, how do they expect to be good? Or rather, don't practice as much as other people. How do they expect to be good, right? When you look at, I think Gambit's coach tweeted the amount of practices they had across 2021, and Ascend's coach responded to them and was like, I know you guys practice a lot. I didn't realize it was that much. And Ascend themselves were tweeting out, their coach was tweeting out some stats about their practice time and stuff as well. And that level of grind is going to be necessary to stay above your opponents. If other people are putting in that level of work, it doesn't just have to be time. You can practice smart, not hard, but you've got to be putting in that level of dedication, and it feels like Sentinels are a bit wobbly on that front. The point that I do want to make here, though, is that I think any discredit towards TenZ or Raucus is just ridiculous coming out of this event. For starters, to focus on Raucus, their compositions were better. Sure, they didn't have any like set strats, but the guy was only with the team for a small amount of time. It didn't make them worse. He wasn't the reason they got grouped. Like, that's
just so stupid.
Yeah, they weren't worse.
Is that what people are saying?
Better. It's most of the aggression has gone towards TenZ for some reason.
Yeah.
Well, I've seen that he doesn't perform in elimination game stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's probably if you actually look at it, probably a valid thing for TenZ himself, but there's no reason to think about that in terms of a roster change, right? You could criticize TenZ. He's not untouchable. And I think he should be criticized, especially on Split. And this podcast specifically was talking about that before it even became a problem, really, in major tournaments, right? But so it shouldn't be that he's untouchable. But in terms of a roster change and stuff, come on, I haven't seen that.
Who are you going to get to replace him? Shut up, man. And also, the team is never going to replace him when he's bringing in that amount of viewership and performance regularly. All right, he's lost his spot for best.
Effect, but way bigger.
Yeah, I mean, come on, he's not Mixwell though, is he? He's so much better. He's still a star caliber player. He just has one map where he's consistently shit. That's one map in the pool where he's shit. Yeah. And there's 6 where he's good. So have a look at yourself in the mirror if you're telling him to replace TenZ. That's just nonsense talk.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it needs to be a cultural shift. It needs to be something changing with them. When they've spoke about in the past, their hesitancy to pick up coaches because they don't vibe with the team. That's normal when you work with people for the first time. You're not instantly best mates. It takes a bit of time for rapport to get going, and to actually get comfortable working with other people. And I think, I don't know if we all agree on this, but I feel like that was a defining factor for the teams that were successful at Champs was planning, game plan, and the overarching I guess like you put it, Josh, the layers of where it was coming from with certain teams.
Well, look at the teams that made the semis. Like they all have really heavy head coaches, right? Like we all know their names. We know that they do a shit ton. We know that they run prac, run scrims, run strats. Like all of that stuff has been baked into those teams a long time. They all have serious game plans, multi-layered game plans, and even the teams that made the quarterfinals were showing us some really cool stuff, like Fnatic, like X10, like Cloud9 as well. Yeah, the meta might not always be like this, but it is at the moment.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah, they got some time. Raucus has more time if they want to get an analyst or someone to work with Raucus as well.
He said he wanted to go back to playing.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, Raucus, I think, has got he was saying how he had options already lined up.
Recently.
See, I know he said he wanted to be a player still before, but then also after they lost, he seemed so, I don't know, passionate about trying to make the team better, or he felt like he had a lot of responsibility and knew he could do better. So that kind of sounded like the talk of someone who wanted to try and take a crack at it and
going
help.
With Padapan.
But
he's going with Padapan. He's going to the Los Angeles Gladiators.
I saw him talking in the bathroom at Champs. I saw him talking.
He was whispering in the ear of the guard from the guard.
Okay, well, that's our clout topic gone out the window, and now it's time for the real topic.
No more clout.
No more clout, but there's a decent amount of clout that comes with this next topic.
Okay.
It's the Wyatt's Weekly Award.
Dude, it's so dark in here. I can't see anything. What is that glowing? Oh. That's Wyatt's Weekly Award.
Yep. This week. We haven't seen that clip in a while. I forgot
that
clip.
The spin effect.
That clip is pretty silly.
The glow in the dark trophy.
This week, the award, it goes to, how would you say? It doesn't just go to one person, but it doesn't go to a group with a name. They're not represented by anyone. It goes to an idea of a person. It goes to a type of person that has just been so helpful during these times of roster moves and disarray, chaos, what's happening. It just goes to the everyman Twitch viewer. That guy who just somehow has all the information. Who is this person with 6 followers? And why do they know all of the Brazilian roster move transactions and are DMing me with every update? But I appreciate you. How do they... How thank you for the gift. How are they just so aware? How do they know? But they always know. I've received so much information from
the Twitch community.
The viewer, the people that they are connected to the Valorant hive mind, and they intake any and all information, and they dispense it out to the masses. So our brains that just crave new information, new things happening, we have something to latch on to.
Oh, that's special.
This week the award it goes to you, and you know who you are. I don't know who you are. You're out there. And you're quite
very one-sided parasocial relationship. You're being drip-fed information. Could be true, could be false. Doesn't matter though.
Yep.
There's a name
cNed's
for
going
these
to MIBR.
The name is The Streets. That's
it is The Streets.
It goes to the streets.
Yeah, it is actually The Streets.
All right, wow.
Yo, Furia were pissed at the streets before Champions.
I'm ready to put a close on this episode of 71 for Plat Chat Valorant.
The Christmas special.
The Christmas special. Did you enjoy all those skits? Those Christmas-themed skits that we did?
Look, I got a elf cup. Huh?
Oh, do you remember the elf cup skit? That was a good one. We got to go eat a Christmas dinner. I got to also cook as well. This is. I mean, we're running late to everything. Oh god, my family—they're gonna kill me. They're gonna kill me when they find out how late we've gone. They're gonna burn me. Anyway, we gotta go. We gotta go. Thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Do the notification thing. Click the bell, whatever. And write in a comment how many times you would rub Josh's head for luck.